Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack
and Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff this week on the show. It's probably going to be a shorter one because there's not a ton going on this week. We are still working away watching Mobile Suit Gundam Wing for the next episode of Weekly Suit Gundam, which should be next week's show. But we have a couple pieces of news. We've got some new reports on Rockstar Games, which I think is interesting, and some reports on the next-gen consoles and the PS5 and its production plans, so a little more about that. We've also been playing some different video games. We're going to talk about that. And at the end of the show, I have a fun game I have written that Sean will be playing about the new utter flop of a streaming service called Quibi.
What?
Which is a real thing.
What?
It spent $2 billion to make, and it has already fallen out of... After 2 weeks, it has already fallen out of the Apple App Store's top 50 apps.
Interesting. And just for context, I have not heard you say the word Quibi ever.
You have, because it was part of our game on streaming services, where it was one of the ones that I think you even were tricked by thinking it was fake.
Okay, yes. So the only other time I've heard this term was in a game where I was trying to determine whether something was a video streaming site or a porn streaming site.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically the goal of the game is to make fun of Quibi, which is nobody's watching it, but there's lots of funny stuff to read about how fucking stupid it is. So I think I've written a pretty good game about that.
Cool.
Yeah. So that'll be the end of our show. Let's always, as we do at the top of episodes, this is like week 5 or 6 of this, let's head over to the Plague Cast.
Yep. Plaguecast.
How has your Plague time been going?
It's not been particularly different. We're definitely, I think, just in the period of head down and get through it kind of stuff.
Yep.
Like no real changes. I'll be interested. We have a whole staff meeting, a full faculty meeting on Monday. And for a while, I was like, didn't know what it would be about. And then I got an email from the superintendent of the district talking about like very general projections about how like the degree to which funding is going to be reduced next year for obvious reasons. And so that is what I imagine we're going to find out about. So other than that, and just being like, you know, we just live in a hell world right now, and even more of a hell world than we were living in for the past 4 years. So I'll be very curious to see what happens in terms of budgeting and stuff like that for the foreseeable future. But
yeah. I feel bad for you guys. Can you do some teacher therapy with me, Sean?
Sure, yeah.
So I had a thing this week where a student emailed us because she got a notification she was failing the class because she didn't do the work. But anyway, she was saying, "Hey, these 2 absences were excused, something, right?"
Yeah.
And so the professor asked me, "Hey, can you look through your records, double check this?" And I'm like, I was pretty confident because I'm very meticulous with records, and if it wasn't marked on like my data sheets, then I don't think I had it. Well, I'm like, okay. So I searched my email inbox for her name, like first and her or his, gender not important. For their name, first or last, and nothing comes up in my inbox. I'm like, okay, but I have a thing where I feel so bad whenever I see a student about to like fail or something.
Yeah.
Even if it's someone who like I know kind of just didn't do the work, I get like manic about it. Like I think I told you about the story about one time when I was grading papers and someone just didn't fill in their blue book on a test. And I was like, well, why wouldn't you? Because that's like an automatic fail.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I threw out all the folders they turned the stuff in, so I went fucking dumpster diving. And of course there wasn't anything, right? And so it's the same thing this time, but it was dumpster diving because I then manually looked through all my emails from January to now. Didn't find anything. Then I was like, well, I'm using my desktop email client. Maybe I should use the university online email client and search for it again. I didn't know. Nothing. So there was nothing. Like she said she sent something. She didn't send anything. It wasn't there. But like, I don't know. I get so like about it. And I know I need to probably like let go, but I don't know. It's always like I get like weirdly mad. I'm like, why am I doing all this work? The problem is they didn't do the work. It's not my problem.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel bad.
I mean, I definitely get it. And although there is a different, I think at the university level, especially, you need to not do that. Like for me, it is a slightly different thing since it's compulsory education for both the grades I teach is compulsory. Like they have to be there. They have no choice but to be attending 9th or 10th grade English. So for me, and then there's lots of political stuff that happens behind the scenes about what it means to fail kids and stuff like that in public education. But it's something that like the only reason people fail, like there are lots of reasons why this happens. But in terms of grade calculation, the only way really anybody fails anything is if they don't do the work.
Right.
Like that's, in my experience, I don't have a student that turns in the majority of their work and then is also failing the class. It just isn't, unless you turn in most stuff other than the most critical assignments. That's the only way that happens, and even then you're still really not doing the work. So it is, like, at some point, I think in that situation, you need to email that student and, like, ask them this, like, what days would you have sent these emails? Like, can you find or like resend the email and put the onus back onto them if you can't find it? Like that's how I would handle that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what I did. But it's like it always and I know I shouldn't. I should just rip the Band-Aid off more. My students are not all doing particularly great with the move to online instruction. We have our replacement for discussion sections is a very simple discussion post where they have to write like max 2 paragraphs, and 11 of my 33 kids didn't do it this week.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I thought about writing a very angry email, and then I'm like, you know what? They know. I don't need to fucking hold their hands. This is university.
You definitely, sending the email is not a...
Yeah, I know.
Because it's not effective. Like, that's, in my experience, that is not a strategy that, like, what has been effective for me has been, like, quick one-on-one communications with the students. That's just, like, a short email or a Google chat message that's just like, hey, did you do this thing? And then see if... And then... Because sometimes, for some of them, it is a legitimate, like, they just forgot because it is such a massive shift to their schedule and their priorities. But like, the big email is not going to be like, because they don't read the big emails.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah, you got to keep it like short and simple and non-accusatory, and that's going to be the most effective in my experience.
That's what I've always said. That's always one of the weird things about teaching is when you get into class and like sometimes I'll have like low attendance on a day and I'll want to complain about it, and then I'll start saying, I'm like, but all you guys are here, so you didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
I'm like, tell your friends, I guess, but you didn't. I have no one here to bitch at because you're the good students by virtue of having shown up.
Yes.
So anyway. Also, I want to complain about our neighborhood, Sean. Mm-hmm. I was out for a fucking walk yesterday. I was walking my dogs, and there was a fucking tailgating party going on or something. There were 2 spots on the main street that runs through our neighborhood where there were, like, at least a dozen cars lined up and a bunch of people out, like, touching each other and being really close and obstructing the street, so I had to go around and walk over a snowy hill with my dogs because I didn't want to be, right up next to people. Mm-hmm. So I did get home and I called 911 because the police should break that up because all those people are breaking the law. But like, what the fuck?
So yesterday it was a Air Force, whatever academy we have in Colorado had a graduation and they were doing a big flyover. So that's what people are probably doing.
It's still stupid.
It's still stupid, yeah. But it wasn't just people randomly deciding, let's go out and fucking touch each other.
I mean, on my way over to your house, though, I saw, again, a bunch of people out in the street just congregating. Mm-hmm. And I know this is like, and I'm on edge about it because obviously this is coinciding with mostly astroturfed protests, but a bunch of stupid people getting out and doing, giving each other coronavirus. Including Alex Jones, which is great because hopefully he dies and that's it. You know. If only Trump could do the same and we can move on. We can move on. It's so frustrating. Especially because, like, I don't care for myself so much, but this is a neighborhood with, like, a lot of senior citizens, and they should be able to walk around their neighborhood and reasonably expect to stay 6 feet apart from people, which is very easy.
Yes.
We have perfectly wide streets. It's not hard, but it pisses me off.
Yeah, it is as someone who has, for most of my life, enjoyed taking long walks around this neighborhood and having the streets mostly be empty, and I like that. Like, I don't like constantly bumping into people or having people walking around with their dogs, like, where it used to be like I would take a nice 45-minute walk around the neighborhood and I would run into 2 to 3 people that were also like taking walks, and then maybe a couple times in the summer there'd be people like in their driveway or whatever. And now it's just everywhere because everybody's cooped up inside and nobody's going anywhere else, and so they're just...
But most days people have been pretty good about distance. So this was annoying. Mm-hmm. Anyway. Yeah. All right. So that's the Plague Cast. The world's on fire.
It will continue to be so for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Oh, my brother's coming home. I should tell you all about that. He was going to be coming home in June. Japan has had a reemergence of the virus, so he is coming back because they closed everything down. So he's coming back at the end of April, and he has at least one, maybe two podcast topics he really wants to do with us. Not related at all to his time in Japan, I want to be clear.
Okay.
They're very funny, but yeah, so he'll probably be on the podcast next month. That'll be fun.
Cool.
Well, after he's, stays in the basement for 2 weeks in quarantine.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll, strip him down, burn all of his clothes that he's wearing.
Yeah.
Spray him with disinfectant.
Hopefully he'll be able to get a test. He's coming in through San Francisco, and they are doing testing in the airport. So I would hope he doesn't have to stay in alone for 2 weeks. A test would be easier. But hey, our president fucked everything up so much we don't have tests. So it's great.
Yay.
Yeah. South Korea figured it out. They're smart.
Yeah.
We're not as smart as South Korea.
No.
Fucking.
Obviously, yes.
I mean, even under the best of times, we probably wouldn't be.
Uh-huh.
South Korea built, one of the world's best economies in, 30 years. It's fucking wild. And they did it, without authoritarianism. But still.
Yeah.
We suck. We really suck.
Don't worry, Jonathan. We made America great again, and that's what's important.
Yeah. We're going to have hundreds of thousands of people die.
Uh-huh.
That's what makes America great.
Historically, it seems to have been the case. It's the arguments that people make about when they look at America so good and what is actually going on.
Yeah, I mean, hey, highest death toll on the homeland in 100 years, right? That's great.
Just classic Americana is what we're experiencing right now.
America of the years right before the Roaring 20s, when everything was famously...
I'm very excited to do Great Gatsby, which is what we're doing with my 10 Honors kids. It's going to be fun.
Oh, boy. All right. You want to talk about some stuff?
Yeah, let's talk about stuff.
All right. What have you been playing?
I have moved on to Yakuza 5.
Nice.
I realized I had my weird Yakuza fever dream, and I was like, my body is telling me something, and I need to start playing Yakuza 5. And it's pretty yesterday, I played the shit out of Yakuza 5. I was planning on sitting down and playing the game for 2 hours in a session. Ended up playing it for 8 hours in a session.
Jesus.
Because I just hit the point in the Kiryu storyline where I finished up a bunch of the side stuff and the story momentum really picked up. And I went from chapter 2 to chapter 5 and basically finished out the whole Kiryu section at the beginning of the game. Because like Yakuza 4, Yakuza 5 has a number of different protagonists. I think it has technically 5 protagonists, but two of them are kind of shared, so it's really 4. So I finished that whole first section of the game with Kiryu, and it's very good. It has an amazing opening where Kiryu has, for reasons that don't become apparent until a bit into the game, he has sort of estranged himself from Haruka, his adoptive daughter, and the orphans at his orphanage in Okinawa, and he's moved to Fukuoka under an alias of Suzuki-san, and he's working as a taxi driver, and all that's fucking great. And there's just a great big taxi driver mini game.
I was about to ask.
Yes, that's it's some really good arcade-ass driving that's you just being a taxi driver, and there are 2 types of missions. One is you doing... I would say it's like Crazy Taxi, but it's sane taxi. It's the similar mechanics of you're picking people up and dropping them off at specific places and stuff. But it is, you get points for following the traffic laws. You have to signal when you're at a stop sign, and you get extra points and stuff like that. But then the other type of mission you have are racing missions, where there's a big, long storyline where Kiryu gets wrapped up into... having to race against this street racing group called the Devil Killers, I think, or the Killer Devils, I think is what they're called. And he has to basically take down this illegal straight racing organization as a taxi driver. So you're in your taxi racing them on the highway, and with different loops, and there's a drift mechanic that's very Ridge Racer-esque.
Oh my god.
Yakuza is very good, and this is where Yakuza 5 feels to me as someone who started with Yakuza 0. It feels like I kind of have come full circle, because Yakuza 0 is the one they made after 5.
And then they did 6.
And so 5 feels to me like the beginning of what feels like modern Yakuza, because it is the most, it is the PS3 platform was matured by the time you got to Yakuza 5, and so they were more used to development there. And so a lot of, just very basic quality of life features that were not in Yakuza 3 or 4, but were in 0, get introduced in 5, and there's little, sound effects, touches, and stuff like that just feel okay, this is the Yakuza I kind of started with. I'm kind of back there again, and that's very nice.
Though you mentioned taxi stuff, and I'm like, man, Crazy Taxi would be a great game to play to relieve some stress right now. And I immediately looked it up on Xbox because that's a 360 game, so you can play it on Xbox One. I might actually own that. I'd have to go check because that was one of those arcade games that was out early. But yeah, Crazy Taxi.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of Sane Taxi too.
Yes, it is. I love just because they're very short missions. They're like 2 to 3 minutes long, and it's just a lot of like, okay, just gotta wait at this stop sign, let the traffic go by, and then they have like people will just like pedestrians will run out into the road randomly. You have to make sure you stop before you hit them, or you'll lose points. It's a lot of that kind of stuff. The opening of the game is great because another thing that this shares with Yakuza 0 is it has. It's got a much greater command over the like slow-paced elements of Yakuza, which is something that feels like they had been building to. That they were very good at the big melodrama moments in the earlier games, but some of the slower character stuff that I loved in 0 and I love in Judgment was not quite fully there yet. And 3 and 4 make big strides in particularly for when they came out, are way ahead other games of that period in terms of being able to like show normal humans doing normal human stuff. Yakuza 5 has this great low-key opening where you don't know yet like what situation Kiryu's in, and you're following Daigo, who is Kiryu's successor to the Tojo clan, and he's been a significant supporting character since 2. And he's in Fukuoka on some like Yakuza-related business, and then he ends this like very shady Yakuza meeting, gets into a taxi cab, and says, just drive around, cabbie, like, I just want to think to myself, and I'm just going to talk out loud here. And you already know that the driver's Kiryu because the guy who voices Kiryu has this super distinctive voice, so when Tsutisi says one syllable, you're like, that's fucking Kiryu.
You're also 5 games in at this point.
Yeah, you know he's obviously going to show up, but it's like immediately, and you know, at the end of the scene, the whole scene is Daigo talking kind of to himself, but in this way that it's supposed to be obvious to the audience that he knows who the driver is. We know who the driver is, but the game's not telling us why Kiryu's in this situation and what his sort of place is in the world right now. And it's clear that Daigo's kind of wants advice from Kiryu. He clearly wants Kiryu to come back into the fold, but Kiryu's resistant to it. And at the end of the drive, Kiryu kind of just pulls over and says, I'm sorry, mister, but I can't. I'm not going to accept any fare from you. I can't just drive someone around with any destination. I'm going to have to ask you to get off here. And then Daigo says some roundabout line that's like a clear metaphor for like, oh, like you should come back and work on this thing, but it's like couched in like a friend of mine, blah, 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 kind of stuff. And Kiryu's clearly resistant to it. Daigo gets off the cab. He's dropped off at this bridge overlooking a river. He leans over the rail in the river, takes a draft out of his cigarette, flicks the cigarette, wide shot, panning the cigarette as it falls into the river, close up on the cigarette as it's floating on the river with really good looking fluid dynamics in this cutscene, and then Yakuza 5 pops up on the screen while soft acoustic guitar music plays, and it's so good.
I gotta play this series.
It's so fucking good. Yeah, it's just got, it's so moody, it's so atmospheric, it's got this great sense of tone, and it is, I think, really my favorite stuff in this franchise and in these games, because Judgment I would put in here as well, is the slow-baked kind of elements of it. Because the big, ridiculous action stuff is awesome. That at the end of Kiryu's part at the beginning of the game is a good example of he basically fights off like 100 different Yakuza dudes because his plans are great. His plan for basically running this like group out of the city is he more or less threatens them and says like, hey, you need to show up and fight us at this pier. And he's like, because it's this big Yakuza organization, they can't turn this down because it'll make them look bad. And when he shows up, Kiryu's just like, I'm just going to fight you one-on-one. Because if it's just me fighting in here, that means there's no war between these different Yakuza families. It's just one civilian, one humble taxi driver defending himself against some Yakuza. And then he proceeds to beat the shit out of like 100 dudes barehanded. And it's so good. And so those kind of big action moments are incredible, but they only work so well because it's such a slow build-up. Kiryu is so insistent on, I'm Suzuki. I'm just this taxi driver living in Fukuoka, living my life in my shitty little apartment, doing my thing. I do not want to get dragged back into this shit. And he holds off for like 10 hours. And then finally when he's like, enough shit goes wrong, this one really cool old Yakuza dude gets stabbed and this whole meeting happens and the guy asks Kiryu to do this thing, and Kiryu says, "You know what? I'm no saint, but I can't turn down a good man's request." And then that's when he goes off and is like, "I'm gonna take care of shit." And it's so good, and that's why I played for like 6 hours more than I expected to.
Yeah,
is that stuff started happening? I'm like, nah, I gotta go until this reaches its like natural climax, and now I'm into the second protagonist section of the game, which is also very good.
Awesome.
Yakuza is great. I'm very happy playing Yakuza again.
Absolutely a series I will do at some point. This stretches out long enough. I will have to do it at some point because I will run out of games.
Yeah.
All right. And actually, this week was interesting for me because I tried a bunch of things before settling on something new to play. Mm-hmm. I've been playing Animal Crossing in the background this whole time, and I want to talk a little bit about that because let me talk about that now with Animal Crossing. I've gotten really into this week the section of the game where you can do a lot of terraforming and like island customization, where like literally there's this mode called Island. It's the Island Designer app on your little Animal Crossing phone, and you activate that, and your character puts on a hard hat, which is very cute. And you can go around, and you have to spend your Nook miles to get the different programs for it, but you can, like, if there's a river, you can just bury over the river and make that land. If you have a stretch of land that you'd like to make a little lake, make a little lake. You can make a river, you can make a waterfall, make a cliff, destroy a cliff. Really high, I mean, if you wanted to put enough time into it, you could make the island look like basically whatever you want within, the space that you're given. And I've been doing a bunch of stuff. Like I kind of expanded this. My house was near this like place where 3 rivers came into one tribunal near a waterfall. And I kind of broke the river up and made the waterfall really big and moved my house right against the waterfall. So I can go out my door and like fish immediately, but also it's just kind of cool. You walk up to my house and there's a waterfall that takes up the entire frame behind it. I then made, I freed up a bunch of land by moving some of the rivers into different places and getting rid of some parts of the river, and I made a big giant orchard for trees. So like this was an idea my brother had, was he just made this one part of the island just his fruit tree section, so it's like he can just, that's where I go to get all my fruit, and it's the expensive fruit that people will like pay me a lot for when I go sell it. So I made that. I made a big field of flowers. Today I got rid of one cliff and brought a river all the way out back to the ocean, and like it's time consuming, but in like a kind of fun, menial, weird way that feels very Animal Crossing. And that it's like, this is all kind of tedious, but I can't stop playing. Which is totally what Animal Crossing is. And that's been really fun. I'm feeling myself. I want to say I'm slowing down, except I've probably spent more time playing Animal Crossing this week than any other week, just because of all the terraforming stuff I've been doing. I can feel myself slowing down a little bit in that I've achieved a lot of the like basic goals of like filling the island with residents and all this stuff. Yeah. But now I'm into the like, well, now I really want to make it just the way I want it. So I don't know how long I'll stick with Animal Crossing every single day, but I've got more parts of my house to unlock, got more money I got to pay to Tom Nook. It's very fun. It's, there's definitely flaws with the game that have emerged for me after, I've played like 45 hours. I've played a lot of this game. I think they've removed some parts from past Animal Crossing games, and I know some of this was removed in past games, but I haven't played as much of all of them. So, like, you no longer do, like, chores for your residents, like, or your villagers, where, like, they'll ask you to do a little favor or something. And I really miss that, because that encourages you to go talk to the other people on the island more or in your town more, and there's kind of not a mechanic that really encourages you to do that in this game, and I think that's a lost opportunity. There's little like certain things that they've done to like improve quality of life have also, I think, robbed the game of a little bit of its personality. Like, there's no longer a post office because you can just send messages through the phone. But I liked the post office in the original game and the birds who, like, worked there and stuff. Lost and Found, there's no Lost and Found building anymore, so you don't have, like, Copper, the dog, doing stuff, and he was cool. You just have a little Lost and Found bin. That was many games ago that they did that. But it's just, there's things like that where I'm like, they've taken some things away and, like, not... And, like, sometimes it got, again, in a quality of life way, it makes it easier to play, but, like, it loses some of the personality, which to me is the whole point of Animal Crossing. Because if I just wanted to, like, make something that looked cool, I could go do Minecraft or something. Yeah. So, or Dragon Quest Builders is the better one. But, yeah. So there's little things like that. I do think they need to patch the crafting process, because the silliest thing is that when you are in your house at a workbench, it can't access the materials you have in your house's storage. So if, like, I have a bunch of wood in my storage... All right, go out from the workbench, go to storage, grab the thing, put it in my pocket, then go back to the workbench. Why can't it just, like, read what I have in storage, Yeah. Which is something Dragon Quest Builders 2 did that was really good. So there's things like that, but, I still really like it. It's still very charming. It's there's a lot of, like, if you like the customization part of Animal Crossing and, like, just making cool looking rooms and making a cool looking island and all that, it's definitely the best Animal Crossing for all of that. And I've been playing a lot of it, probably more than I would if we were not in quarantine. But that goes for every game right now. So yeah. But in terms of other video games that I would, because Animal Crossing I usually play like while I'm watching TV or listening to a podcast or something. For other games that I would sit down and like put a pair of headphones on and focus to, as you all know, I played Resident Evil 4 last week.
Yes.
And I finished that. We talked about it on the show last week.
Great game.
So then the choice was, well, where do I move on after Resident Evil 4? The obvious option would be Resident Evil 5, next numerical game. I was thinking about it, resisting it a little bit, but finally I'm like, I'm on a roll. I should just push through and play all the Resident Evil. So I bought Resident Evil 5 on my Xbox, downloaded it, started playing it. I made it through basically the first 2 acts, and I tapped out because that game is fucking awful. Like, it's just bad. It's worse than I think its reputation suggests, because what I know about Resident Evil 5 is people say, they kind of lost the horror thing. It's more of just an action game. It's kind of bland, and also it's pretty racist.
Yes.
And it is pretty racist, and we'll get to that in a second. I think people undersell how bad the gameplay is in Resident Evil 5, and like maybe it gets better later in the game, but it is this weird, unwieldy mishmash of Resident Evil 4, which it uses a lot of the same base, like so many of the same base mechanics. Like no other 2 Resident Evils, like I feel like, are that close. Even Resident Evil 2 remake to Resident Evil 3, like adds a couple of little flourishes to like make the gameplay fit the new thread. No, Resident Evil 4 is that. Plus Gears of War. There's a lot of Gears of War in it. Obviously, that's the whole co-op system, and like not done well, but it's all taken from Gears of War. And what was the other game I was thinking it reminds me of? Oh, fuck it. But anyway, it's very like, you can just point to the other games. Call of Duty. It feels very modern. It clearly was influenced by Modern Warfare. I mean, it's a game from 2009. Every game in 2009 was influenced by Modern Warfare.
Yes.
But like, yeah. So it's just, and it doesn't feel, there's very little in it that kind of shouts Resident Evil. Like Resident Evil 4 is,
other than I assume the guy at the beginning of the title screen of the game does go Resident Evil 5.
He does, yes, he does do that. So
there's one thing about the game that literally shouts Resident Evil.
Yes, but you know what I mean. Like, yes, Resident Evil 4 is extremely different from 1, 2, 3. But by the end, especially, you really do feel like, okay, this is still Resident Evil. You know, especially I feel like once Ada Wong comes in and like the Plagos really start to feel like they get really fucking weird. You know, like they're not just shambling citizens, but like there's shit coming out of their heads. Like this, okay, this is Resident Evil. There's nothing in Resident Evil 5 that really screams that to me. It's just so bland. It's like it's very clearly aesthetically based on Modern Warfare because it is that same baby poop brown goop that is every video game's graphics from like 2007 to 2013. Every like shooters, I should say, like anything set vaguely in the Middle East, which it's Africa, but it's just the Middle East is how they've like, and it's just this brown poopy soup that looks awful. Kind of like the one I think of a lot is Modern Warfare 2, which is just the most boring looking fucking game. And so that's bad. But like the gameplay is, like I said, this weird mishmash where it's still Resident Evil 4's thing where you have to plant to shoot and you have the like dot sight and all of that. But it's way faster, all of the combat. Like they send way more enemies at you. The enemies are way more mobile. You get swarmed very fast. And it doesn't feel right. Like Resident Evil 4 takes a little while to get used to it. But once you do, nothing about that game kind of feels dated. It feels like that's exactly right for its design. Resident Evil 5, it's like, this just should let you move and shoot. There's nothing about the design is conducive to this. It's just a hassle. Like, and I just finished 20 hours of Resident Evil 4 that I said is maybe the best third-person shooter ever made, and you go to 5, I'm like, this is awful. And it's kind of the same basic system, but everything around it is so bad. Like the inventory, they just ruined the inventory system. It's so much worse than in any other Resident Evil game, because for one of the things they do to make it faster is you don't pause to go into inventory. It's all in real time. And like, especially for the speed at which the game moves, sometimes that's kind of interesting of like the strategy of like find a spot, but like it just doesn't, especially with, again, you have to plant to shoot thing, that does not go hand in hand with, and you can't pause the game. That's so weird to me, you know? Because Resident Evil 4, like I said, is almost at parts like a strategy game, and that you stop and like you pick you're very meticulous with what you're going to do, and the game encourages that because you can't select anything just from the game. You have to go into a sub-menu. So Resident Evil 5 is bad in that way. You also like run out of inventory space so fast, and it's like just constant annoyance, and I don't think there's any way to expand it in 5. And then the worst thing about it is the partner system. which is a very bad it's clearly a Gears of War thing that they're doing. But Gears of War, that's one of always been the best things about it, is that if you want to play it in co-op, it's one of the most brilliant co-op experiences because it's so effortless. But if you don't, you never have to think about it.
Yeah.
You just play as who's the main character?
Marcus.
I almost said Dom. Dom is not the main character.
Yeah. No.
But anyway, you play as Marcus. Maybe Dom's more memorable. Maybe that's why.
He's true. Yeah. He's the character that is like a person, and then Marcus is the character that's just like a.
Yeah, I mean, I like Marcus for that, but
Yes.
But anyway, you would play as Marcus, and then you would have all your buds around, and they would be doing stuff, but you didn't worry about them at all. Like they just took care of themselves. If they died, you didn't lose the game. Shit like that. But in this, it's basically if you don't have a live person playing co-op with you, either online or in the same room with Resident Evil 5, you are playing two characters at once. Is the best way I can describe it, because you have to you have both of their equipment menus that you have to deal with. When you're picking up stuff, you can either assign it to your character, so you're playing as Chris, and then there's also Shiva, so you can assign it to Chris or Shiva. You give Shiva commands, and if Shiva dies, you lose the game, even though sometimes you have no control over that because she's a shitty AI character off doing her own fucking thing. And I could see the game being reasonably kind of fun as a co-op experience, although I also think part of the way it doesn't feel like a Resident Evil game at all is that being alone and going through a mysterious place, that's Resident Evil. And even 4, they add Ashley in there, but it's a different kind of thing. You still feel kind of isolated with her.
And she's absent for a lot of the game, or you're playing as her without Leon being there. There are long stretches of Resident Evil 4 where you are literally isolated. Right. Which is emphasized by the fact that you have had stretches of the game where you're not alone.
Yes, and Resident Evil 5, you're never alone. You're always 100% you have to be with Shiva. Yeah. It's it just doesn't feel like Resident Evil. So maybe it would be kind of fun as a co-op experience, but as a single-player experience, the game is it's effectively broken. It just doesn't play well at all, and it's a constant hassle. And there are some fun moments. There are some interesting-looking boss fights. I finally tapped out at this stupid fucking bug in Act 2 that you have to get behind. And just and you have to basically, that's a fight that you have to have another player there with you, because you have to have one person drawing the creature out, and then you run around to its back, and trying to figure out how to get your AI partner to do that is fucking hell. So that's when I tapped out, and I'm I don't want to play this game. This is so bad. Honestly, I have not played Resident Evil 6, and I know Resident Evil 6 gets a worse rap, but if Resident Evil 6, if all that is just a really bland action game, that to me would be way better. I could get through a bland action game. Resident Evil 5 is hard to play in a way that I just cannot fucking stand.
Yeah, so I haven't played Resident Evil 5 for 10 years, because I played it around 2009-ish when it came out, and I played it over the course of 2 days with a friend, couch co-op, I think during spring break or something. And that is my only experience with it. And I did that before I played. That's my first experience playing Resident Evil game. Yeah. I had not played Resident Evil 4 at that point. And my memories of it was being this is good enough. And I had to put my hands on Resident Evil 4, and I had seen, because the friend I was with really liked Resident Evil. And basically was just I need someone to play this game with, so will you come over spring break? I'm sure. And in that context, it was okay. But it is definitely the weird race stuff was apparent at the time. And then we talked about this somewhat off the podcast, but the ending to Resident Evil 5, did you look up the YouTube video?
I haven't yet.
It was something I had completely blacked out until you were talking about wanting to play Resident Evil 5 on the podcast, the Resident Evil 4 podcast, and I'd thinking about, because I played Resident Evil 5 and I was trying to remember the things about it I remembered, and it was just vague things, and then all of a sudden a blockage broke open one day, and I was oh right, the ending of Resident Evil 5 is fucking awful. Even as someone who had no real attachment to Resident Evil as a franchise, and only a general familiarity with it from knowing someone who really liked the franchise, I could just understand how bad the ending of that game is and how poorly it treats characters like Jill. Or Wesker comes back at the end of Resident Evil 5, and it's so fucking stupid. And it is just, the ending of that game is ridiculous in the worst ways possible. And I just have such a distinct memory of that. So I really want you to look up a YouTube video of the ending of the game, because it is. I think it will further justify your feelings about Resident Evil 5 if you see the way that game ends, because I do not think it's a game. My general memories of the game was I found the beginning section to be the most palatable, and the further went on, the worse it got, both in terms of gameplay design and story, is my vague recollection.
Because also the way it does story, it is constantly interrupting you with cutscenes. And in, like, some games that do... I'm going to talk about a game later that has a lot of cutscenes, but they're fucking rad as shit, so I don't care. But with Resident Evil 5, it's just like, shut the fuck up. You can't put this much story in a Resident Evil game. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Needs to be a little more background. But it's like, man, what a fall off that was. So like ultimately, so then I tried a couple of other games that I had sitting on my Xbox, and I realized I'm a little bit of a commitment phobe right now for long games, because I just, for whatever reason, I'm into kind of playing short, like tight campaigns. Because I started playing, I played like the first half hour of Dark Souls 3. Which at some point I still want to finish because I've played Dark Souls 1 and 2, and I'm like, this game is so cool. Oh my god, it's gorgeous. I forgot this is the first Dark Souls made for this generation's consoles. This game is so cool, but it's a lot of a commitment, and I don't want to commit right now. So maybe in a little bit. I booted up Nier Automata, and I'm like, that game's first hour is one of the best first hours in the history of gaming. Nier Automata is really cool. I want to play this again, but I'm also just like, that's also... Nier Automata is a long game. It's not 100 hours or anything, but you do have to like play the game 5 times. So like, it is a long game. So I'm like, okay, what's something like shorter, punchier I could play? And then I started thinking, like, what the fuck happened with Resident Evil 5? And I'm like, what was the history of Capcom? I vaguely remember, and I'm like, boop, 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 look it up on Google. I'm like, oh, right, this is when everybody left Capcom.
Yes, yeah.
This is when, so after Resident Evil 4, Hideki Kamiya and Shinji Mikami both went to, like, this indie studio that worked with Capcom and made a couple little things. The thing Mikami made was this game called God Hand that has never been ported off the PlayStation 2, but sounds like an interesting kind of brawler game. And then finally, Hideki Kamiya and Shinji Mikami left Capcom altogether. They formed, I'm simplifying, but they formed Platinum Games, and Platinum Games obviously is still going strong. Shinji Mikami has since left Platinum Games, and he started Tango Gameworks.
They're the Evil Within 2, and Ghostwire Tokyo, which they showed the trailer for at the last E3.
Yeah, so he's like gone back into horror with all of that stuff. But obviously Hideki Kamiya is still one of the main guys at Platinum. And the first 2 games they made at Platinum happened to have just gotten console ports, new gen console ports. Hideki Kamiya's first big game obviously was Bayonetta, or not first game ever, but first game at Platinum was Bayonetta. And the other one, Shinji Mikami's, was Vanquish, the third-person shooter. And you had told me about Vanquish when we talked about Platinum back with like Astral Chain.
Yeah.
And you said, and I had never heard of it. And I think a lot of people haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it was definitely like a sleeper hit.
Yeah.
That it didn't sell very well, but the people who played it were like, this game is fucking awesome. People should play this game.
Yeah, and so they did this 10th anniversary bundle for PS4 and Xbox One, and it's Vanquish and Bayonetta. You can also, if you're buying digitally, you can buy them separately, because I already have Bayonetta on Switch, and that port is fine. The only real benefit for getting on this is if I wanted to play it in 4K, and I don't have a 4K TV, so fuck it. Yeah. So anyway, I wound up buying Vanquish, because I'm like, okay, Vanquish is effectively the next shooter Shinji Mikami made after Resident Evil 4. That's probably what I want more than Resident Evil 5. Let's see what Vanquish is like. Sean, I'm about halfway through Vanquish. I'm like halfway through Act 3, and there's 5 acts. Holy fucking shit. How do more people not know about Vanquish? Vanquish is one of those games I play and I'm like, how has this not been a franchise that has been played out by now because they've made too many of them? Because it's so fucking good. If you plopped me down in front of Vanquish and I didn't know what it was, and you said, this is a new game Platinum just released this month, I would believe you. There's almost nothing in that game that dates it other than some of the textures look like 360 textures. But honestly, like the remaster, it's full 1080p, it's 60 FPS, it's fucking rock solid. And it feels like a third-person shooter that came from the future. Because there's a lot of Gears of War in it, obviously. Because, if you go with the third-person shooter lineage, Resident Evil 4 influences Gears of War. Gears of War influences everything else, you know? And so it's got some of the Gears of War cover system and stuff, but it is lightning fast, where Gears of War is like purposefully like kind of laborious and slow, and you're this big hulking meaty guy who kind of lumbers around everywhere. Vanquish is so fast that one of the main buttons is this fucking crazy ass zoom you do across the floor, this like Rockstar slide that you can do all over the map, and it's one of those mechanics that, like, that's when I say like it feels like it's from the future. I've never seen a game do something quite like that in a shooter setting. And so it is extremely fast, it is extremely colorful, where Gears of War is kind of brown and gray. It is extremely funny and self-deprecating, where Gears of War is very self-serious. There's one of the main characters in Vanquish is Lieutenant Burns, who's voiced by Stephen Blum. and he's just the best character. He just has the stupidest one-liners and kiss-off lines, and he's always got a giant fucking cigar. It's great. The main character, his name is like, what, Gideon? Or Sam Gideon.
That sounds right.
Yeah, Sam Gideon, who's always smoking a cigarette, and he has this fucking metal suit that like goes over his face, and he's fucking cool. Anyway, Vanquish is hard to describe if you haven't seen it, but you should like look up videos and then go buy the game because it's fucking amazing. But it is like think like everything, like I said, like think Gears of War, but super crazy, like fast and mobile, and the weapons are nutso, and it's a wild game. It's very arcadey in a lot of ways. Like obviously Shinji Mikami likes that kind of thing. It is also a game that interrupts with cutscenes quite frequently, but those cutscenes are for like they're not there for story. They're there to just do crazy action movie bullshit that is so fun to watch. And man, that game, when I really do mean like it feels so modern in that there's nothing else like it, and in fact, it frankly feels like third-person shooters have generally stayed on the slower end of things, I would say.
Yeah, like I think the biggest change we've had since the original Gears of War era of third-person shooters is most people have kind of gone away from button cover to the dynamic cover.
Right.
Some, like Last of Us, I think to great success. Other games less successful because if dynamic cover systems don't work well, they are just annoying.
Yeah.
But like we've kind of moved in that direction a little bit with third-person shooters. But yeah, they still like to be very slow, very thoughtful kinds of games. And Vanquish is more, I mean, honestly, it's more like the modern Doom games in terms of its attitude.
Yes.
It's like, it is more like what if you made a Gears of War type third-person cover shooter, but injected a lot of Doom. Either, for us, we would look at it as modern Doom, but classic Doom as well, with that, like, just the insane speed of it. And then there's also a lot of just like character action type combat stuff in there as well, because there's like you have slow down, like you can do slow-mo stuff, you have the slide, you can do like flips off of enemies and stuff like that. So there's a whole like movement suite to the game that is really important to the way it plays, that makes it very kind of graceful feeling versus the stop and pop kind of thing you get with the Gears of War.
Yeah, it's extremely acrobatic. Like, it's kind of crazy to think that Shinji Mikami made Resident Evil 4 and then 5 years later made this. It's like, it's so, like, you can see some of the influence in there, but, like, it is so different and crazy, and it is fast, and it is acrobatic is, like, the main word I would use to describe it, because, yeah, like, with that slide, as you're sliding, if you aim your gun, then you go into slow-mo, and you can be sliding across the ground, shooting robots in the head. It is so rad. It is such a good game. I posted a video on my Twitter last night where they do this QuickTime event where you just punch a robot in the face for, like, 30 fucking seconds, and it's great. But, man, oh, man, I am so glad they put that game out on new consoles, too, because it needed the attention. And also, I was looking at the Digital Foundry breakdown, and that game originally ran like sub 30 FPS, and now it's like a smooth, silky 60, which for that game, like, it's crazy to think that game was never 60. It's so clearly a game that wants to be 60 FPS. So I would highly recommend it. It's on its own without a sale price. It's $25, and I feel like that's totally worth it for the game. And if you get it in the bundle with Bayonetta, which also seems like a really good port, it's $40. So I'm really glad those are out. I think it's a little weird that Bayonetta is out on Xbox and PS4, and the sequels can never come out that way. But I feel like if you have a Switch, you probably just want it there just to have all the games there. Because I'm weird about that, and it would be weird for me to like switch consoles with that. But yeah. So yeah, my plan is to play Vanquish, and then I think what I'll do after that is actually jump over to Bayonetta, because I kind of want to follow Kamiya too.
Sure,
you know? The missing piece there would be Devil May Cry for me, which I do want to get to at some point, but I'm waiting for them to put the Devil May Cry HD collection on sale at some point. And maybe you said you had to wait a long time for that. So
yeah, because I mean, if you want to stick with Kamiya and Mikami, you would only have to do Devil May Cry 1.
Right.
So if you wanted to be very strict about it,
yes,
do Devil May Cry 1, because Devil May Cry 1 is definitely the one where you see, oh, this was originally going to be a Resident Evil game and then they turned it into something else. Like, that is very apparent, and that element of it is kind of bred out of the games by the time you get to 3.
Yeah, but I want to play the Bayonetta ones too, and like these are all short, 10-hour campaigns, so I'm kind of going to jump between these, and it's, I don't know, I'm into this kind of like Capcom Mikami, Kamiya style, their crazy fever dreams of games that are also just insanely playable. Crazy to me, just like going through this and researching those two guys. It's crazy the careers they have had and the consistency of it over like 25 years still being like major forces.
Yeah.
A lot of game designers who are like that high level, who are not named Shigeru Miyamoto, like at some point kind of fall into some kind of relative obscurity or take a just kind of background producerial role, which both of them still do, but like they've both directed games in like the last 5 years. So it's very interesting to follow all of that. And then I think the Wonderful 101 remaster is coming out in May, because I kickstarted that, so I'll get that at some point. I think that's the last one Mikami did, or Kamiya.
Yeah, because then he moved on to the Scalebound, which then got canceled.
Yes. Yeah. And obviously producing all of Platinum stuff, but so who knows? And we still, like, Platinum has like 5 games they're making. We just don't know what they all are. Bayonetta 3 is one of them, but we'll find out.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm excited to play all of that. It's like I've never played a ton of Capcom's 3D stuff, and it's like it's a rich legacy that clearly got fucked up in those middle years. Although they seem like they're on a better path.
Oh
now.
Yeah, I mean, like stuff like Monster Hunter World, Devil May Cry 5, like they're making really great games again. But
Resident Evil 7, they just had a really good 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. So it is really that. I mean, it's something we've talked about a lot on this podcast, is that feeling of that 360 PS3 generation. This is part of like playing these Yakuza games has made me think about this. With like the clumsiness of Yakuza's 3 and 4, is that period for Japanese game development for a lot of different reasons was just really rough, and some of it was attrition for like Capcom, like attrition of developers going different places and lots of shit going on like that. And then by the time we get to the modern consoles with Xbox One and PS4, and then now Nintendo Switch, it is much more rich in Japanese game development, because all those people who went and like formed their own studios and did stuff like that now are like have a fully formed teams making games, instead of this just weird hodgepodge. We just don't quite know how to use some of the different like interface stuff and tech for the HD generation of consoles, and a lot of our senior staff are leaving and making their own studios and stuff. Just that period was just not great.
It was basically like just like the PS2 era kind of going on like kind of last legs through the PS3.
Yes, is what it... Yeah, until you get to like the tail end of the PS3 and then it starts picking up again.
Yeah. I am very thankful Capcom has resurged and not gone the way of like Konami and just made pachinko games, because that would be very sad. It's good that Devil May Cry, like all their series, like came roaring back somehow. Yes. It's wild. Not that Devil May Cry, I guess, ever really fell off, but
no, I think like depending on who you ask and their feelings about the DMC Devil May Cry game, some people.
Well, there was a big gap, because 4 was like 8 years before 5 or something.
No, there's a big gap between 4 and 5.
Yeah, and luckily, this is the other nice thing, is all these series are just easily accessible on modern consoles. More studios, please do that.
Yes.
Capcom actually is like clearly the industry leader in this. You can get
you can
every Mega Man game. You can get every fucking Devil May Cry and Street Fighter, and everything they've made.
Yeah, everything just gets ported up, and it's very nice.
Yeah, and at some point maybe I'll have to try Monster Hunter World, because that's on Game Pass.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I look at Monster Hunter World Iceborne a lot on the PSN store. I look at it, I'm like, I don't have the time. Like, I have all this other stuff I want to play. I know the massive time sink it would take just to get me into the DLC, because I would need to level them, because there's a lot of in-game, post-game stuff in Monster Hunter World I'm like close to, but I know there's like a couple of missions I still need to do. I'm like, I really want to play it, but I do not have the time to sink into a shit ton of Monster Hunter again. Yeah, so that's the stuff. Lots of good games. I'm actually having fun just going through some of gaming's like history and past right now. It's a good time for that. Yeah, it's the thing about having a lighter, because this period would have been light on game releases regardless of the quarantine and all the stuff going on. And there's something nice about like, okay, I can actually. It is perfect for me because it is this nice window right when the Yakuza Collection physical version came out. So I'm just like knocking through all of those. I was so certain that I was going to be like really exhausted of Yakuza. I had all this plan of how I was going to pace them out, and then it was just like clearly I was wrong because I took like a 2-week break and then started having dreams about Yakuza. I'm like, well, I got to get back in there. One day you were at the kitchen table, you had a knife to your pinky, and one of your mom came in and was like, Sean, what the hell are you doing? And you're like, oh God, I was in a trance. I was just standing in my basement singing Japanese karaoke songs. Like, it was just bad. It was just a bad time. But yeah, like this just gives me the space to finish all the Yakuza games to then catch up. So when Yakuza 7 comes out, I'll be you're close to done. Because you've got just 6. Yeah, I've got the like last. I'm like probably maybe a fourth of the way through 5, so I've got to finish up 5. Then I've got 6. Almost as relative here, but you know, And although like now that I'm playing 5, it is becoming very clear to me thematically why 0 was the next game. There's a lot of stuff about Kiryu looking back on his legacy. That feels like this is like the main thing that 5 is about. And then 0 is a game that goes back and says, okay, let's take a look at the two most like significant beloved characters of this franchise, Kiryu and Majima, and how do they become the legends that we know? How do they like? What is their starting point for them to eventually build that legacy? And that is such a clear thematic kind of duo they've put up there. And so now I'm like, wait, shit, is this when I actually should be playing Yakuza 0 and like replaying it again? Because it feels appropriate.
Here's an interesting question, Sean.
Yeah.
Now, having thought about all that, and you're close to done with the Kiryu saga at least, would you recommend people start with 0 or Kiwami 1 and then do 0 in place between 5 and 6?
I would still say do start with 0 because, especially if you want to be crazy and you want to go, I'm going to like import the Japanese only HD update of Yakuza 1 on the PS3. Like if you want to go down like a weird route and want to replay with the original games and do Yakuza 1, 2, if you want to do that route, you can. But if you want to play Yakuza Kiwami, I think you really especially need to start with 0 because Kiwami is both a remaster of the original Yakuza and a sequel to Yakuza 0.
Okay.
And so a lot of the new stuff they put into Kiwami, and this is true of Kiwami 2 as well, they build off of things that they originally put into Yakuza 0, like side story stuff, all of Majima's secondary campaign that they put into Kiwami 2, all of that is a sequel to his story material from Yakuza 0.
Okay. It's kind of like the Resident Evil remakes they've done where like they're conscious of the rest of the series having come out and like they are.
Yakuza Kiwami is very much in the RE2 remake, or what it sounds like FF7 remake is like this, that it has basically the stuff from the original game is in there, but it is so expanded and updated and modified. Because Yakuza 0 is also like, it is obviously it is a great starting point, but it is clear that game is great, both has a starting point, but it also slots in, it seems to me, really well as this. Yakuza 5 is Kiryu looking back on his legacy. Yakuza 0 shows you how he built that legacy. And then Yakuza 6 is the last game with him as the protagonist. And so like that sequence makes a lot of sense. And honestly, I think if I replayed Yakuza 0, I don't think I would go through and try to do a 100% style run. I didn't do absolutely everything, but I did the vast majority of the content the first time I played it. If I wanted to, and I just did a New Game Plus, I could probably play through the main story of Yakuza 0 in like 15 hours if I wanted to.
Okay.
That'd be a pretty tight playthrough. But I'm concerned that if I start to do that, then I'm going to be like, but then I really want to just do all the mini games and all that stuff again anyways, and then that's like an 80-hour game. Like Yakuza 0.
And then you're going to finish that and be like, I could move on to 6, but I really want to play Kiwami 1 again.
Yeah, now that I have all this additional context, really I should be going back and reassessing the journey that Kiryu has gone on with Haruka. Because that's one thing that's crazy. Another reason why I really want to replay Yakuza 0 is so much of the heart of Yakuza is about Kiryu's relationship with Haruka, who's his adoptive daughter that he kind of finds and takes care of. And that's basically more or less what the story of Yakuza 1 is about. Then she's a pretty major character throughout the rest of the games, and I know that she's one of the playable characters in Yakuza 5, and she's the one that is paired with another character, so that obviously they're not going to have Haruka, who's like a 16-year-old girl. She's not going to be walking around on the streets like beating the shit out of people. Like she has.
I want her to fight 100 Yakuza guys.
Yeah. So they have her paired with Akiyama from Yakuza 4. I already know that kind of setup basically is what they're going to go for. But the idea of now going back and playing Yakuza 0, which not only doesn't have Haruka in it, it is set before she was born. Like, the idea of Kiryu, pre-Dad Kiryu, like, what was he really like? Because I'm so used to Dad Kiryu now. Going back to young, like, 20-year-old Kiryu seems like crazy. That's another reason why it feels like it'd be cool to replay Yakuza 0.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I enjoy hearing your thoughts on this series as you go through it, because it seems like it has very much consumed you.
It's so good. Like, it is this. Every single one of these games, I have nothing but like pure love and affection for.
That's great.
It is that kind of like weird, quirky, earnest kind of media that it's like it has like tons and tons of rough edges. I'm not going to pretend that these games are like perfect and super polished experiences, but what they have, the heart that they have there, is so powerful that it is. If you're the right kind of person, I think you know, Yakuza is a game franchise that either you don't get it or you get completely sucked into, I think. And I'm definitely completely sucked into it.
Well, Yakuza 0 is sitting on my Xbox, so
it's very good.
At some point.
Good fucking game.
Yeah. All right, you want to move on to the news?
What's going on in the news, Jonathan?
So first off, we have a report from Kotaku, but I think we should mention here that the writer of this report, Jason Schreier, this was his last big investigative piece for Kotaku, because he left Kotaku this week, as frankly most of their staff is done, because they are owned by one of the world's most evil hedge fund companies, which I really don't even need to say. Hedge fund companies are just evil.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they have done, I mean, there was the whole thing last year, I don't know if we talked about it much on the podcast, but where they shuttered Deadspin, and all this awful stuff that's come out of that, and just being very bad to the unions there. So we don't know where he's heading. I know he said he has another job lined up, so I'm sure he'll land on his feet.
Yeah, and he's staying in game journalism.
Yeah.
He's not going the Kirk Hamilton route and just becoming a professional musician.
Which I think is also really cool.
Yes, no, that's awesome. But it is that thing of, because when Jason Schreier announced that, which was not hugely surprising to me, both because he had a tweet that kind of set it up the day before, but also, as you said, Kotaku's
he's been making fun of Jim Spanfeller and all the hedge fund guys in every post he's made for months.
Yeah, so it's been very clear that that's the direction he's been heading in. But when that announcement came out, I had this realization of, I think he's the last person from Kotaku whose articles I actually check, because it was him, Kirk Hamilton, Gita Jackson. Now Gita's with Motherboard/Waypoint. Most of the writers there. I think the last one is Heather Alexandria, but she's not full-time Kotaku. She writes for other places as well.
I really like her stuff, but yeah, she just had a Metal Gear Solid 2 retrospective that was really good. But yeah, and I like Steven Totila, the editor. He's good at his job, but he doesn't do a lot of writing, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I feel bad because they had a really great group, and they're kind of scattered to the winds. But that might be better, honestly, in the long term for video game journalism if they're all kind of building out different areas.
Yeah, and it feels nice that a lot of them got out on their own terms, and
yes.
Gita immediately got her job at Motherboard, and she's on Waypoint Radio, which has been awesome. And then Jason Schreier's obviously going to be fine.
And their podcast that they did, him, Matty Myers, and Kirk Hamilton. They're starting a new version of it, but I would listen to that every so often because it had very good theme music, because Kirk Hamilton does sax.
Because he is a professional musician,
yeah, which is great. But anyway, so that's good. Always happy to have more video game podcasts in the world, even though there are competitors, I guess. I'm kidding, we're not at that level. But yes, so it's too bad, but I'm excited to see where he lands, because he probably is the most important voice in video game journalism.
Yeah, especially specifically journalism, not...
Yeah, I don't mean thought leader and...
Yeah, because I feel like we need to, I'm not saying us on this podcast, because I think we generally do this right, but I feel like there are lots of people in the broader video game community that really needs to at some point understand that there's a distinction between someone who is a journalist and someone who is a critic.
Yes.
Because we are definitely at the place where it used to be that those were basically identical roles in old GameSpot, IGN, when they were on top of everything. But now, Jason Schreier, I think, is very clearly handling the most effective and the best investigative journalist working in games right now. His stuff has had huge impacts. He's gotten massive stories, but then, other people do game. Heather Alexandria is a good example of, she's a game critic.
Yes.
She writes game criticism. She's not going out and doing investigative reports.
Gita Jackson does a lot of, cultural criticism and, looking at that part of the industry. And those, So I meant specifically important in the journalism side of it, of, breaking shit. And this story is an example of that, because this last big report he did for Kotaku, kind of a good one to go out on, is that... Rockstar Games, makers of Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption, have had a noted improvement in culture over the last 18 months. And this, the last 18 months includes back to when, at the launch of Red Dead Redemption 2, Jason Schreier had a piece that was about the bad culture at Rockstar and how awful the crunch was around Red Dead Redemption 2, and how people at Rockstar Lincoln, who do the testing, were getting way underpaid and working way over time and couldn't have windows open while they were doing their work. And it sounded really awful, but this is a nice story because it sounds like there have been positive steps. There have been a lot of personnel changes, getting rid of kind of toxic people in management, better communication with staff. There were a lot of staff interviewed for this piece who have said, it's not perfect, but there have been a lot of, they're clearly listening. And I think that the coolest thing that I read in here was that Rockstar Lincoln, which is their testing branch, has had really concrete steps. They increased salaries for the whole team. They converted all the contracted employees to full-time, made overtime optional and paid at 1.5 times, and allowed them to finally bring their phones to work and stuff like that, so they aren't basically inmates
Yeah.
at Rockstar Lincoln. So, there was a theme of cautious optimism because they said, like, who knows when we're working on Grand Theft Auto 6.
Yeah,
And,
like once like crunch happens again on the next project, who knows if all these changes maintain effectiveness.
Yeah. But, if Rockstar can do it, anyone can.
Yeah.
I think is the lesson here, and that is hopeful. You would really hope that, like, other studios like Naughty Dog, when Last of Us 2 is over, should probably like look at this and be like, what can we do in this, to prevent the brain drain we've been having? Because it is hopeful. As you say, cautious optimism, things could fall apart. But this is the story you don't get a lot of in games these days, is the follow-up where, like, there was a blockbuster Jason Schreier report about bad things happening, and then management was like, well, what can we do to fix it? Because I think we've said this many times, a lot of people have said this, video games as a big mass media art are not sustainable in the way these companies were doing it. Mm-hmm. And so these transformations need to happen. And Rockstar is obviously one of the most significant industry leaders in the industry. So again, if they can make some of these steps, and if their employees can reach out to someone like Jason Schreier and say, hey, things are getting better, that's actually weirdly hopeful. And I don't know what to say, because usually when we talk about these, we're sad and things are being bad, and it's like, this is actually kind of nice.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is really nice as an affirmation that, like, the efforts that people are making on the bigger level with, like, people like Jason Schreier, or just us and other people talking about it and, like, trying to change the culture, even with just you and your group of friends, and getting people to think about this and be aware of labor conditions around video games, and that video games are not things that just sprout out of the ground magically every 5 years and it's like, oh, here's Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it just happened, right? Like, you have hundreds, thousands of people who are working on these things. They need to, like, their conditions of labor need to be thought through and need to be cared for, and this feels like that attention and concern is starting to produce more and more effects in the AAA space, because it has clearly been effective in, like, indie spaces where indie studios, because they're obviously, since they're smaller, they're way more mobile to make these kinds of changes. We've seen that happening all the time in the indie space. But for a huge, like, one of, if not maybe the biggest developer in the world making those kinds of changes, like, that is massive.
Yeah. Did we ever talk about Dan Houser leaving Rockstar?
I think we did. I don't remember.
Yeah, because that also, that's not really, that was kind of on the periphery of this story. I think there's still some mystery around that, because he was obviously one of, like, the main guys there. Yeah. He was one of the 3-person writing crew on Red Dead and GTA 5 and GTA, like, just going back a long time. So I don't know if that was part of any of this. I don't know what role he had in all of this, but that's obviously a big change they've had too. So we should also probably joke about, was it IGN that reported this story as Grand Theft Auto 6 is still many years off, and that was their main takeaway? Did you see that?
Yeah, it's like the most like search engine, just like, we need to get this, man. We got to get the clicks. I don't necessarily begrudge people for that's, whoever was that IGN, that was their job to got to filter this down to the thing that will get people to click on this story. But it is
fucking stupid. They just launched Red Dead Redemption 2. Grand Theft Auto 6 is not on the immediate horizon.
Yeah.
If it is being made as a single-player game at all, which I really fucking doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it took them effectively this entire generation to put out one video game.
Yeah, which we're seeing a lot of, man. I mean, it's kind of crazy that this generation will not have had a new Grand Theft Auto. I mean, 5 was on it, but it was obviously made for the 360. It will not have had a new Elder Scrolls. It will not have had, like, what other... There's just so many, like, big franchises that just kind of went on pause this whole generation.
Yeah.
It'll have had too much Fallout.
I was about to say Halo, but then I realized Halo 5 did come out, and it just feels like it's been so long.
But almost, I mean, one Halo game and the whole Xbox, that's one of the craziest stories for me on the Xbox side.
Yeah, but, like, one of the weird things to think about as we're, like, moving into the next gen stuff is this, like, weird contradiction. I mean, it's not a contradiction, it makes sense, but on the face of it, it seems like a contradiction of we have, like, way fewer games from individual studios. So it's like, Naughty Dog are going to have had 2 full games. Lost Legacy's there as like a 0.5 or something. But effectively 2 full games that released on this console generation, Uncharted 4 and Last of Us 2, compared to the 4 Uncharted 1 through 3 and The Last of Us on the PS3 generation. So it's like you're seeing that across, that's affected every single development studio. And yet there are more PS4/Xbox One games than there were 360 PS3 ones.
Yeah,
there's more development happening because there are more people making games. And that's awesome because it just feels like things are diversified so much more. I feel like we don't have the same, like, thing you're experiencing with Resident Evil 5, where it felt like an entire genre of video games was represented by like one simple archetype, and it's just like almost every game in that genre for a period of several years was squished into that. We have like trends with open world games, but even when we have those trends, there are multiple different outliers that exist at the same time because so many people are making games.
Yeah. Rockstar went from 3 to 1.
Yeah.
Because GTA 4, 5, and Red Dead were all... I still sometimes forget that those were all one system.
Yeah.
But it also has had this weird effect of making this generation feel, to me, shorter. And maybe that's just because I'm also older. Mm-hmm. But, like, the 360 generation, having had those many, like, plant your flag titles, it's been a weird experience. But that's a good transition to our next topic, which was there was a Bloomberg report this week on Sony's production plans for the PS5. And this is really interesting because Sony is limiting production output versus past launches. They are planning to have 5 to 6 million PS5 units produced in the fiscal year ending March 2021, so the launch window basically. Yeah. Whereas the PS4 sold in that period, might have produced more than that, but it sold 7.5 million. This Bloomberg report also explains that Sony is still struggling to figure out the price point. I think they and Xbox are in a fucking Cold War until someone blinks. Mm-hmm. And developers and experts are expecting $499 to $550 price tag. Interestingly, COVID-19 has not had an effect on production plans. They've still been able to make the numbers of PS5 they want to make. The lower production numbers are due more in part to the just complexity of the stuff in there, and that it's also at this point, it's so cutting edge. It's sharing some production facilities with like smartphones and stuff. But COVID has obviously shifted their PR plans greatly, because and true for Xbox as well, we can assume. So yeah, this is interesting to me, and there's a lot to kind of think about here, but Sony intentionally kind of planning at this point a smaller launch than the PS4 with a higher price signals a little bit, at least I feel like, about how they're viewing this, and that I don't think this transition is going to feel much like past console transitions. It
feels like they're like, and this is obviously true of the Series X as well, because like consciously more premium devices. Like, and so because again, the PS4, Xbox One were pretty low to mid-range PCs relative in terms of their power at the time they were released, and they we have seen huge gains in terms of like graphical fidelity and what video games can do on them, mostly because it is, even if it was a low to mid-range PC, it was still a massive bump up from what we got with 360 PS3. But this is such a metrically just like massive change. It is so much bigger. The jumping from Xbox One, especially if you're going from base console Xbox One to Series X, base PS4 to PS5, it's a huge gap to where we are now in a space where these consoles will be doing things or have the capacity to do things technically at launch that would be very difficult to replicate on a PC that you could buy due to the virtue of the really advanced SSDs they're using. And that's not a place that consoles have been in since like early 3D kind of stuff, which is very cool. But that means that it is this premium type device that they're going to have to charge. Because I suspect even if they did $500, it seemed like the implication of this in the previous Bloomberg report is at a $500 price point, they would not be selling that thing for profit. They'd be selling it at a loss, which is the Xbox One and PS4, both at their price points, they made profits on each model.
Yeah, which was for Sony was like super important because they had these scars from PS3 that did not become profitable until very late in its lifespan.
Yeah, that Blu-ray drive and stuff like that was very expensive for them early on.
Yeah. So, and they immediately, because I think the original price model of the PS3 was a profit, but they had to slash it down so far so fast.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did a whole like Twitter thread just because I do this sometimes just because it helps me think out loud. Because I'm still in this weird place where I'm trying to figure out, and I'm 100% sure that everyone at Sony and Microsoft is thinking this too.
Yeah.
How do you launch a new system in the middle of what we're living through? Mm-hmm. Because what I was thinking about is like, let's just take it specifically from Sony because I think they're in actually a slightly more complicated place just because they have more games coming out. AAA game releases have had a pause button placed on them right now, as evidenced by Last of Us 2 getting pushed indefinitely. Ghost of Tsushima, they said, what did they say for that? July?
It's like late July. I think it's like July 27th. I'll look it up.
Yeah, and I think that's also liable to get changed because who knows where we will be by late July. And it's also possible that if they wanted to put Last of Us 2 out in August, then you're not going to do that and Ghost of Tsushima in the same month. Things like that. You're not going to want to...
June 26th.
June 26th.
Yeah,
okay,
so a month earlier than...
I don't think that's coming out in June.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
We'll see. But let's just say, for like a thought exercise, you can't really ramp up AAA game releases again until August. That still might be optimistic. I don't know. But then August to October, you would have, assuming none of these get pushed to 2021, you would have Ghost of Tsushima, you would have Last of Us 2, you would have Marvel's The Avengers, you would have Cyberpunk 2077, you would have possibly a new Call of Duty Assassin's Creed, things like that.
Well, definitely a new Call of Duty.
Yeah, definitely a new Call of Duty.
Assassin's Creed is the question mark because they like to fuck with us now. But Call of Duty will hit its year release forever.
Ubisoft also pulled a bunch off the calendar, including Watch Dogs Legion, which feels like that's when they would want to put that out. Who knows? But that would be a huge, massive chunk of AAA games to come out in a relatively concise period. And then if you assume the new consoles want to launch in November, you would be selling this big new hardware in a landscape where the existing old hardware has just like flood of big new marquee titles coming out. And you're doing it in the middle of a recession. And so then I think it becomes this weird choice for consumers of like, well, I want to, get a new console, but I also want to play games. I only have so much money, and if I want to play Cyberpunk and Last of Us and Ghost of, just like pick 3 out of the 7 or whatever, that's already like $200. And then the consoles are going to be fine. So that's just that this feels like the marketing challenge. And so I've thought about this, like, on one hand, you could say the smart thing to do would be to push the PS5 and then Sony could like finish out the PS4 this year, get those big marquee exclusives they have out and give them like the focus they need to like fully sell through and everything, and then launch the PS5 when it feels a little more fallow and demand has gone up. Or, and this is what I feel like their strategy seems to be, is to treat this year as kind of a soft launch and have the PS5 out focused on enthusiasts, smaller sales numbers intentionally, but with the idea that, well, we're going to try to make it big the following year when people have it in their hands. And they're probably, the first adopters will be really enthusiastic about it because it's expensive and it's high-tech stuff, and get some word of mouth out there, but kind of intentionally treat 2020 more as a soft launch than you typically would for a new console generation. That kind of feels like where they're moving. But I don't know.
Because I think one thing that's interesting to think about is how much of that strategy is informed by COVID-19 stuff and how much of it is stuff that they would have been doing already. Because I had a realization the other day that, like, this is feel like it's, this year in video game releases has felt very thin, but other than Last of Us Part 2 and Iron Man VR, because I always just like that they had those two next to each other, because it's like, Iron Man VR legitimately did seem kind of cool, but it's always funny to put, like, those are like the two games next to each other. Last of Us Part 2 and Iron Man VR, those got pushed. But like those games wouldn't have been released yet anyways, and we like there were like no games planned to be released from now till like it was like late May for Last of Us, late June for Ghost of Tsushima. But this was a super barren period in what was already like announced anyways. Yeah, and it is like so far. Like and that made me think like I think that it's much more probable that Ghost of Tsushima comes out when they said it would come out anyways. I'm not sure that they're going to actually push that. I think maybe their strategy is because Ghost of Tsushima is going to be a smaller release compared. Like Last of Us Part 2 is going to be one of the biggest releases in this new PS5. Last of Us 1 sold over 10 million copies. Like it's
over 20 million.
Yeah,
now.
It's a massive, massive fucking seller. So I think that is one of the main things that why they were like, we need to push that thing back and make space for it so that we can market it and do the things we want to, because it is. They're one of their biggest releases in the history of this whole console platform. And I think maybe those conditions don't necessarily exist for Ghost of Tsushima, and then being like, well, maybe we do limited physical release depending on, who knows, coronavirus stuff is going to be so mobile, like, it's so fluid. You have absolutely no idea what the situation is going to be like in late June. There's so many factors involved that, like,
we also don't know if there might be
things get worse, right?
Yeah, we also don't know if there might be a development hit on it, because if like the final phase that they're in gets slowed down and they can't go gold until who knows? We don't know exactly what state. They're in.
We have no idea where the development was at. We did, like there's lots of factors there. But I would not be surprised if Sony's plan would be to have Ghost of Tsushima come out when it comes out, limited physical, but full digital release, obviously, and that game is going to take a hit on sales, at least there, and then maybe they can like remarket a PS5 up like when the PS5 comes out. It's like, and if you didn't buy Ghost of Tsushima, hey, Ghost of Tsushima, like maybe they like try to do something with that around DLC, who knows, and coop it on that game, and try to do that to then space out, because if Ghost of Tsushima comes out when it says it's going to come out, Last of Us Part 2 comes out late July or in August, I think that
gives them enough runtime.
That gives them the space to then market those games, get those games out there, and then do PS5 presumably in November.
Because all I'm saying is the thing Sony and Xbox doesn't have this problem because they don't have any
they don't have
exclusives.
Yeah, they don't have
their
anything
big
to market other than Halo.
Yeah, well, and their big market exclusive for the year is their launch game, which is like that's they're in a good position with that. Luckily for them, it's a weird, their weakness has become a strength in terms of figuring out the marketing. But like what they don't want is Last of Us 2 coming up against the PS5, even if it can be played on that. It's like it's just a weird marketing situation to have a game with PS4 on its label as like selling 10 million units and being like, but make sure to upgrade to the PS5 that this game isn't for specifically. Like that would be odd. So yeah, and like I said, Xbox, I think, I don't see as much of a reason for Xbox to have to push, just because they're already, I think, planning on this being like, they have a whole kind of slightly different strategy, But I do think like, it does seem to me like Sony's strategy, and this is just different than past console launches, is like what I said of like, soft launch is maybe the wrong word, but intentionally not setting the same expectations as they would like with PS3 to PS4.
Yeah, because it is a more expensive device. Like, and that's why I was saying of like, I think that's part of what that Bloomberg report is implying about like a lot of this stuff is not actually been that dramatically shifted by COVID-19, because so much of it was planned ahead of time. It seems like I think there are going to be impacts. It does, talk about some impacts of they're not able to necessarily like personally go and inspect and like make sure the factories are set up the right way or whatever. There's like implications that there are other things that are being affected by coronavirus, but the general release plans and broad like manufacturing strategy for the PS5 has not necessarily shifted according to that report. Like that kind of says to me that they were always planning on throttling the supply a little bit relative to what the PS4 did, because they're expecting fewer people to be able to buy the device, because it's going to be my bet is on both of these are going to be $500. Like I think
$499 makes sense.
Yeah, that's the target, because lest we forget, that is the price point the Xbox One launched at, as baffling as it is. Fucking like the difference between Microsoft now and Microsoft at the launch of the Xbox One cannot be more fucking stark. Holy shit.
It's unbelievable. I think Phil Spencer still probably wakes up in cold sweats thinking about that fucking launch.
Yeah, like releasing the technically weaker console at $100 premium is fucking crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
No, it's nuts. And they're clearly going to be in parity this time in many, many ways. Because that's those things, they're going to be very worth it. And a good deal.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I really need new consoles. Like now, I can't play games now other than old games like Yakuza and not be distracted by how long the loading times are, because I'm just thinking about it so much more. Yeah.
No, it's wild, and I've been thinking about that too. And I got my stimulus check this week.
Yeah, so did I.
And one of the first things I did is I threw $500 of it in savings, because just let that sit there, let me get a little bit of interest on it, and then use that to buy the new systems in November. That's kind of my plan, is just put a little nest egg away. So I have that. It's for one of them, which I'm not fully decided on. But yeah, I did also want to say, I spent some time last night when I couldn't sleep going back through Digital Foundry articles and videos about the PS5 and the Series X, because I was like, I just wanted to get my head around some of the technical stuff going on there. And I realized when we did the episode where we talked a lot about Cerny's PS5 talk, that is also the week we got a lot of the equivalent details for the Series X through Digital Foundry. And we didn't talk about them as much. And we actually got a couple little things wrong. And I was looking at that, and it was really interesting, because like there were some really exciting things they're doing that are really and very different. Like for instance, one of the things that it's doing, what I had heard this term, but I didn't know what it meant. But like Xbox's Series X, one of the things Microsoft is calling the velocity architecture, which is their idea that they've built the SSD and the system on a chip in such a way. I'll just read the quote from Digital Foundry here of saying, they're talking about the SSD, and they say the form factor is cute, but 2.4 gigabytes per second of guaranteed throughput is impressive. But it's the software APIs and custom hardware on the system on a chip that deliver what Microsoft believes to be a revolution, a new way of using storage to augment memory, an area where no platform holder will be able to deliver a more traditional generational leap. Which is to say that the SSD where games are stored can be used as a memory extension because it can just stream off of that so fast. And I think Sony probably has something similar to that.
Yeah,
but it's like...
so that's what a lot of what Mark Cerny talked about with the SSD of like, both these consoles don't just have SSDs, they have a lot of other custom silicon that they're putting on there that streamlines and effectively maximizes the throughput of the SSD to prevent bottlenecks, which is another reason why the SSDs are so much faster than what you'd normally be able to get on a PC. So
it's also why
it's so fast that it can be used as effectively slow RAM.
Yes.
Is more or less what they're talking about.
Yes, and that actually has enabled. So I know Sony had a bunch of stuff to talk about that, but some of the features like on this is there's a whole texture system that Xbox has done that's fascinating in terms of like they did this study of like how much of a texture is actually used, and it's only like 50% of it, and so like all this streaming stuff and that quick resume feature that Xbox has been showing off that's just fucking wild when you see it in action, where you're like switching between full... They haven't shown Series X games doing it, but they can do it as well. But like old Xbox One games, like you go from Forza to State of Decay in 6 seconds.
Yeah, it's basically they're storing the game state in memory.
Literally what they say is the RAM is caching to the SSD and then it can cache back. So they're probably reserving a little bit of that hard drive or the SSD for these cache states. We don't know if Sony's going to do anything like that. They probably could if they wanted to. But it's like, that's really cool. So that's just one thing that I was reading about that's like, okay, as much as like we were talking about the PS5 and all this like custom SSD stuff they're doing, Microsoft's doing a lot of their own version of that as well.
Yes,
that I think we didn't fully get into. In terms of some of their compatibility stuff, this made it very clear exactly what Microsoft's compatibility solution is and why it's fully native. Is it's a fully like they're in the hardware built in, kind of like what Sony's doing, but it's even more integrated because I think it's specifically because Series X uses consistent clock speeds. They could figure this out.
I don't think that has anything to do with it.
Well, let me finish what I was saying. But part of it is they can everything that can run on the Xbox One runs natively on the Series X, but it also has full access to the CPU and GPU, which was not actually the case on the Xbox One X. I didn't know this. I think it had the full access to the CPU, but the GPU only could go like 50% to backwards compatible games. And the PS5, again, details are kind of scarce there, but from what we know, they've written there was an interview with Cerny where I read a little bit about this, where like literally to make sure PS4 games could work, they basically wrote the old Jaguar timing into the Zen 2 cores as like a base solution, and then the boost mode they've been talking about, that's the stuff they have to test and like would have to open it up, whereas that's a native thing on Series X.
So Series X does have to so when you do backwards compatibility, a game can't take advantage of more hardware unless there's space or it's programmed to do so. So
right, it has to have a performance mode or something, but so it's not every single game will run better, but those that can, it's not a hardware. It's a open to it out of the box is my point.
So I think because from what I've read of both of them, the PlayStation and Xbox's solutions are more or less identical. They're just messaged slightly differently. They're both hardware. They're not emulation. They're both just like hardware solutions for backwards compatibility. So they both are able to just run for Xbox Series X is just able to run Xbox One games. PS5 is just able to run PS4 games because the architecture is similar enough. I don't know if they've clarified this, but I'm probably assuming basically what the Xbox Series X is doing for backwards compat for original Xbox and 360 games is basically just taking it down to Xbox One and then like basically emulating those through the Xbox One stuff they've already designed, since the Xbox Series X can replicate.
Yeah, they basically said it's everything that the Xbox One could do, because 360 and original Xbox One or Xbox games just run as Xbox One games. Basically, is the
within emulated software kernels because they're different architectures. So they both are just able to run those games, but the thing that Microsoft isn't saying is that for games, when you're running it on a like super, it's not overclock, but a much higher clock speed, much more capable CPU and GPU, there is a chance that if there's something weird about that game and it's designed very specifically to be run at the power profile of that locked system of the console that it was designed for, which is extremely rare, but it happens for a handful of games, that something will fuck up with that game.
Yeah.
There'll be some weird glitch, some bug, whatever. And then you have to go in and see if that fucks the stuff up. And that's where Microsoft has a backwards compatibility team that goes and looks at every game. They are doing that for Xbox One games just to check. The main difference between what Sony and Microsoft is doing, as far as I can tell, is Microsoft's backwards compatibility team is robust enough that their policy is when they find those mistakes, they're going to do something on the Xbox side to make it so that those problems don't occur, which is what they've been doing with Xbox 360 original Xbox games. And the reasons why those can run better in backwards compatibility mode is because they've basically designed custom software kernels that allow it to take advantage of the power of the better platform in specific ways that are unique to that game.
Right.
Whereas Sony, in a similar situation, they basically said, if it's a Sony game, they'd go to whatever their developer is. But if it's a third-party game, they will notify that third-party developer and say, like, hey, this game is flagged because when it's running in boost mode or whatever, and it has access to the full power of the PS5, the fucking game speed goes crazy because it wasn't designed to do that. It was designed for whatever it was designed for on PS4. Please fix this or your game will not be playable in boost mode, whatever it is, right?
Yeah. But my point was that the boost mode thing is something they're going to be rolling out on PS5, they've been saying. And whereas the plan is for that to be open out of the box, running on. So if games have for instance, and this is how the Digital Foundry guys were breaking it down too, is if, so I'm not just pulling this out of my ass, is all I'm trying to say, is let's say, what's the game with a performance mode? Jedi Fallen Order. That one had a performance mode.
Yeah, any game with unlocked frame rates.
Yeah. That out of the box could take the full advantage of that. And on the PS5, that one is a big enough game that that'll probably run out of the box. But it would have to go through the check and open up the boost mode. Again, we actually don't know how they're going to implement this on the final box because Sony hasn't been clear on it.
But if it works the same way it does on the PS4 Pro, this is pretty similar to how they talked about boost mode on the PS4 Pro, is this like, we're couching the way we're talking about it for that weird outlier, that like this weird game that if you play it on boost mode is going to get fucked. But when PS4 Pro, so they said that about all that stuff before the PS4 Pro came out. PS4 Pro comes out, people go turn on boost mode, basically everything works fine. I think there's like a handful of games that some weird thing happens. But generally speaking, it's like, the PS4 Pro is not so much more powerful than the original PS4 that is a huge advantage anyways, but it evens out frame rates a little bit. Yeah. Dynamic resolutions are a little bit higher. Uncapped frame rates instead of being at 45 frames per second are like 49 frames per second, whatever, right? I'm guessing that's basically what the PS5 solution is going to be, is they have the capacity, and that's part of what that Cerny quote you're talking about is, they have the capacity to just completely replicate the clock speeds of the PS4.
Yes, and this was what Cerny is saying mode. Is because of all their weird clock speed solutions, it was really important to write that in just because there's more unpredictability in the architecture, right?
No, because the variable clock speed thing for the PS5, I can't imagine that would be something that a backwards compatible PS4 game would ever trigger, because it's only something that, like, if the workload of the game exceeds the performance of the GPU or the CPU, then the GPU or the CPU can downclock 1 or 2% to free up power, basically. Yeah. Effectively for anything that's not, as Sony says in his presentation, like the worst case scenario game that like has this big power surge in the workload, anything that doesn't hit that point, the clock speed of the PS5 is completely stable. It is what it is on that spec sheet. And again, unless there's like some weird, and this is why they say these things this way, that there's always some weird game that is programmed in some weird fucking way that's like, oh, when it has this massively increased power ceiling, it's like burns the console because it just like shoots the GPU to this like ridiculous power workload or something weird like that that like nobody anticipates. That's why they couch it this way, and they test. And again, like Microsoft is testing their games, Sony are testing their games. I think at the end of the day, in terms of backwards compatibility for next-gen consoles, backwards compatibility for what we're playing right now, I really think that it's going to be more or less identical in terms of their approaches. The huge advantage Microsoft has is they've already built up the infrastructure so that they're like really robustly backwards compatible in 360 and original Xbox games,
but it's not
carry forward.
But yeah, so I broadly agree, but what I was trying to say with this segment, and this is, it clarified for me a little bit more about the differences in at least how they're messaging this and like philosophy around it, because Microsoft is very much, it's just going to work out of the box that way without like toggles and stuff like that. Probably in the game there's going to be some of that, but it's just a system level solution all the way down that will be there on day one. And part of that also, this was the craziest thing I read in this whole thing, is that they've come up with a solution that the Digital Foundry guys were very impressed by. It sounded like kind of weird to me, but they were impressed with it, that they're adding HDR to games that were never programmed with it on Xbox, and it is, again, a system-level thing. So they showed off Halo 5, which 343 has never touched for HDR, and they also showed off an old Xbox original title, Fusion Frenzy.
Bill Gates' favorite game.
Yeah, and in both of those cases, they even show in the video the heat map of like it's and it's not like HDR that's like changing the colors and everything, but adding like what you would want on a modern 4K HDR display, the blacker blacks and whiter whites and like that whole contrast range, and it's all there. And that it wasn't clear if that's going to be a day one thing or something they're building on, but again, that's not a game by game implementation. It's something the system is going to just do all the way down. And that's one of those things that's like crazy to me, and signals like clearly their preference is to have this all like figured out at the system level, not bringing in the developers at all for those games, and have that all there out of the box, and that's really fascinating to me. And it seems pretty confident at this point that the PS5 is going to run most of the stuff at the very least as it did on the PS4, and a lot of it will get the benefits, and hopefully more over time, but the priorities are clearly different, and that's just like because I had not seen the whole thing about HDR and some of those other details, and that was crazy to me how much they're putting into that.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that HDR thing, because as someone who has an HDR capable TV, it is a thing that is like so variable based on the game. Some games have like really strikingly great HDR implementation. Doom Eternal is a really good example of like it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Some games like Red Dead Redemption 2 or Monster Hunter World are good examples of this. Like look actively worse with HDR because the implementation is poor. I'm really curious to see like what the machine implementation, like how effective it is. Like do some games just look terrible? Do some games look great? Like that, I think that'll be a good Digital Foundry video that you'll have to download to actually watch. But,
and there'll probably be a toggle, I would imagine, for that. But like, it also seems like, from what they were saying, my guess is it would be the machine level stuff is probably very restrained, like not trying to add or change colors, but more like affect contrast. So just to like smooth things out for modern displays, which is a cool idea. And I love the idea of like an original Xbox game getting fucking machine added HDR and seeing what that would look like.
And I love the game they picked as Fusion Frenzy, the like weird, it's like a Mario Party-esque game that's not very good. It's like of all the original Xbox games, it's not like Jade Empire or Halo 2 or
Ninja Gaiden.
Whatever. It's fucking Fusion Frenzy, the weird Mario Party-esque launch game for the original Xbox.
But in any case, lots of cool stuff going on. I just wanted to talk about that a little more to give some of those details on Xbox where we had kind of been more vague on them. But yeah, I mean, I'm very excited about these systems. Broadly.
Yeah, it is definitely, I'm in that place where it's like I want next gen to come out. I just want to kind of be there.
Yeah. And I'd like more details about all of this, and I'm very curious how.
I want to see games.
Yes,
like
I want to see
we
games.
all we've seen is like a brief teaser of Hellblade and like whatever that weird third-party game was that.
Hopefully, I assume Microsoft will be doing something big in June, because with no COVID, E3 was going to be that for them, right? They were going to do the big Halo Infinite show off and stuff, right?
Sony obviously would have counter-programmed something around that time.
Yeah. So who knows? Like, I assume Microsoft is still going to do June because they probably have it ready. Sony, I'm wondering when. It sounds like Sony was really thrown off by this, of just like they probably had something planned already that got canceled. Yeah, but we don't know. So
again, like I just strongly suspect that they had stuff earlier in the year that, because Japan had a lot of its COVID stuff early, probably really fucked it.
Yeah.
Because since Sony was one of the first companies to announce not going to GDC and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And because I am also curious about like when they do stuff, what is it going to look like? Because if you can't have like camera crews and stuff like is Phil Spencer using a webcam at home? Is it like taking his own? Like is like how are they going to have like people shown, or is it just going to be like trailer reels with like some dude in LA who's narrating in his like home studio, like all that kind of stuff that like where movement gets locked down and you can't have big crews together. Like I'm curious about how that affects the production pipeline for that kind of stuff.
They can probably safely do more than just in Phil Spencer's living room, but we'll see. I mean, they're also so they're out of Seattle. Seattle's contained it pretty well. Maybe by June they're able to at least do like get the crew in an auditorium, not an audience, and get some of it going. But yeah, I mean, Xbox's E3 presentations are these like 7-camera sweeping,
big like the explosions going off, and like the weird, at the last one they had that weird Gears of War segment where it went like below the stage. Do you remember that? Like they like some of their weird. I
mean, honestly, the best thing to do would be to just ape Nintendo Directs, which is usually one guy on a green screen and he talks and it's one camera, and then you go to trailers, and that would be easily producible in any environment. Yeah. So probably want to do that, but we'll see. All right. So that's next gen console talk. Excited for those. You want to finish out this week, Sean, with a little game I made?
Yeah, let's do. What the fuck was this thing again? Blippy, whatever the fuck.
Okay. So this earlier this month, April, there was a new streaming service that launched, Sean. It's called Quibi.
Quibi, okay.
It's short for Quick Bites. So it should be Quibi, because you say bite, not beat. Quick Beat would, I assume, be a farming app. But anyway, Quick Bites, Quibi. It was founded by Jeffrey Katzenberg. Of Disney and DreamWorks Animation fame, or in fame, because he's kind of an asshole. This service had over $2 billion in starting investment. It is designed exclusively for smartphones, and the whole idea behind Quibi, for your Quick Bites, is that it was supposed to be a streaming service for the on-the-go modern individual that you would watch, like so their scripted stuff are called movies in chapters, not TV shows, because it's like the episodes are less than 10 minutes and you watch it on your phone. They have a bunch of reality shows and news shows and daily shows and all of that. It's all designed like literally there's no TV app, there's no iPad app, it's for your phone. And it's only for your phone, and it's even designed that it like crops selectively if you want to watch it in portrait mode. So that's Quibi's whole pitch. Everything is supposed to be 10 minutes or less.
So I'm just going to say right now, these people are fucking morons.
Yes, they are.
Holy
they are.
Shit.
Sean,
again,
it gets worse.
I had no idea about any of this stuff. The first time I'm hearing about any of this is you telling me this right now, because you didn't tell me about this segment before the podcast because you're a weirdo.
Well, because it's a game and you're the contestant. That's how this works. But Sean, they have so many shows. They have like 70 out already, and they are planning to put out 175 in the first year. Now, obviously, COVID kind of messed with their plans because the whole pitch for Quibi is it's your on-the-go thing, and no one's on the go.
Yeah.
So it was a big flop at launch. It did not have a lot of downloads. It has a 90-day free trial if you want to get into it. I did not know that. But it fell out of the Apple App Store's top 50 apps in the first 2 weeks, which is great. I think Disney Plus is probably still at like number 5. Mm-hmm. But no, Quibi, you didn't do it.
Jesus.
Quibi's programming is so across the board ridiculous. Literally, to a show, I looked at the full list, Sean. Every one of them sounds like a joke they would make on Saturday Night Live or something like that. And so I don't think you'll be able to tell the difference between real Quibi shows you could stream on your phone right now and ones I just made up. So that's the game.
Okay, before we start the game, I think we just have to spend a little bit of time talking about why this idea that they came up with
is so dumb,
is so monumentally stupid.
Yeah.
I cannot comprehend how someone in their right mind would think that this is a thing that works. Who wants to invest in a media platform that is viewable entirely in one format on your phone and does not have, presumably, content from anything else? So you're not... if you're watching your favorite YouTuber and they had just posted a video, you're not watching that video on your Quibi app. If you have this TV show you're really into that is something you're watching on Netflix, you can't watch that through Quibi because you're telling me it's all unique programming.
All original programming.
Yeah.
175 shows.
That while they may think that's like, this is so modern. Everyone has this phone with them all the time. We're all on the go. We live these busy lives and we need a media platform that appreciates and supports that, and somehow they miss the forest for the fucking trees, which the main thing that people actually want is interconnectivity of the platforms that they're already engaging in. They want to have one account that deals with every single thing that they do. So it's like if you could have one media account that saved all your YouTube subscriptions and all the Netflix movies you watch and the Disney Plus shit that you're like, that's what people actually want. They want things that simplify and consolidate their media consumption habits, not to diversify it into unique, bespoke, walled gardens that don't communicate with anything else that exists on one singular device. People want to watch a YouTube video on their laptop, on their phone, on their game console, wherever it exists. They want to watch it on their fucking microwave that has a goddamn screen. Like, that's the world we live in. You fucking idiots. How did you get $2 billion? Please give that $2 billion to, like, the education system or something, you assholes.
Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey Katzenberg's an asshole, but he's a pretty smart guy. He's built multiple media empires. It's kind of amazing. This very much reeks of old man yells at clouds trying to figure out how to build a streaming platform.
It's just so, like, it's just baffling that you could so horribly misread people's basic media consumption habits in the 21st century.
And I want to be clear, Sean, you are going to get angrier.
Okay, great.
All right. So, again, the game it's 10 rounds. It's 10 questions. You will be choosing between 2 shows and figuring out which one is real and which one is fake. All of these rounds are themed.
Okay, great.
And I'm going to try to keep a straight face because I'll be perfectly honest, both the ones I wrote and the real ones will make me laugh because they're so dumb.
Okay.
All right. Start with an easy one. Which of the following, these 2, is an actual celebrity-themed reality series launching on Quibi?
Great. Everyone knows my favorite thing is celebrity-themed reality series.
Is it Chrissy's Court, hosted by Chrissy Teigen, where in each episode Teigen reigns supreme as the judge over one small claims case? Or is it Cardi's Co-op, hosted by Cardi B, following the rapper and actress as she opens a progressive food co-op for underserved populations in her hometown of the Bronx?
This is going to be an impossible game for me. Because I barely know who both of those people are. Like, I hear their names. I know vaguely the realms they exist in celebritydom, but this is not, fucking, like, which one of these shows did Miyuki Swashiro star? Like, that's my media world I engage in. You give me a fucking Kaji Yuki-asked fucking question, I'll answer that, but modern, popular American celebrities, impossible for me. I'm going to go with the Chrissy Teigen one.
That is the real one.
Thank God.
Chrissy's Court is real. Cardi's Co-op is fake. All right, you got 1 point. All right, which of these, this is on a similar theme, which of these is an actual reality series starring a former star of the 2000s reality series, The Simple Life?
Oh, I know that show so well.
Yeah. Is it An American in Paris, starring and produced by Paris Hilton, which is a series that sees the heiress and socialite trying to make it big in the Parisian social scene? Or is it Nikki Fresh, starring and executive produced by Nicole Richie, which combines her passions for wellness and hip-hop into her eponymous alter ego, Nikki Fresh? Fresh, I should tell you, is spelled with a $sign in place of S. Of course, you probably already knew that.
Thing.
Yeah,
yeah. Oh my God, I so desperately want it to be the Paris Hilton one because that title is so funny, and I so desperately want there to have been some executive who didn't understand the cultural context around Paris Hilton that makes the double entendre, the unintentional double entendre of that title so fucking funny. So I'm going to go with the Paris Hilton one, just with hopes and dreams in my heart, Jonathan. Please tell me that one's real.
You're wrong. Damn it! Nikki Fresh is the real show. There's not a show called An American in Paris. Yes, I did have to double check if that was the name of her sex tape. It was not. But it would have been a better title for her sex tape.
Like, I just love the idea that there was a group of executives and nobody understood the one night in Paris thing. Because it would have been so funny. I'm like, props to you, Jonathan. That was a great answer.
Okay, good.
But I'm very disappointed in the world we live in that this stupid thing couldn't come up with like such a funny answer. All
right, you're 1 for 2.
Okay.
But hey, your consolation prize is you get to watch Nikki Fresh on Quibi.
Great. I love Nikki Fred $S. H.
Which of these is an actual daily news content social media show produced by Entertainment Weekly for Quibi? Is it Last Night's Late Night, a recap of yesterday's late night television the morning after with a breakdown of monologues, interviews, and sketches? Or is it Insta Classic, a show that recaps the best Instagram posts from the last 24 hours with pics for the best dressed selfies, cutest cats, and most inspiring vistas?
They're both very good. I'm going to go with Insta Classic as the answer.
You are wrong again.
Oh my God!
They are actually
really is Last Night's Late Night.
That's
you
a real
idiots.
show.
That's just called YouTube clips.
Yes. It's a show to recap other people's shows the morning after when it's all already on YouTube. Oh my God.
I feel like the Instagram one would be more useful.
Yeah. There's more Instagram to check.
Exactly, yeah. Like you could, someone would discover some other cool Instagram follow.
Insta Classic would actually be the best of these shows we've talked about so far.
Yeah, definitely, that pitch sold me. I wouldn't use it because I don't use Instagram, but I could see somebody doing, making that show and people liking it.
All right. This one's going to be hard for me to get through, this next one. Which of these is an actual celebrity amateur versus sports professional reality TV series?
Great.
Is it Elba v. Block, in which Hollywood star Idris Elba and pro driver Ken Block go head-to-head, pitting cars against each other through outrageous stunts to prove whose car and which driver is the best? Or is it Shailene versus Serena, in which Hollywood star Shailene Woodley and professional tennis master Serena Williams go head-to-head in friendly tennis doubles with various Hollywood celebrities, with the losers donating to the winner's charity of choice?
Oh my God, this is so hard. I'm going to go with the Shailene Woodley one.
As the real one?
As the real one, as the tennis one.
You're wrong again.
Really? There's a show where Idris Elba and some...
Ken Block do race car stuff. It's real.
I mostly went with the tennis one just because it would be a lower budget.
Yeah. No, you are 1 for 4.
Oh my God.
This is great. This next one might be a little easier. All right. Which of these is an actual scripted series based on a classic short story?
Okay. Please, one of these be Bartleby the Scrivener, the best American short story.
It's not, but I think you like both of these. Okay. Is it The Most Dangerous Game, a modern-day take on the Richard Connell short story starring Liam Hemsworth and Christoph Waltz? Or is it House of Usher, a twist on the Edgar Allan Poe short story about a haunted hip-hop mansion and a reclusive mogul played by Usher?
Did you say haunted hip-hop mansion?
Yeah.
I've read the Fall of the House of Usher multiple times. There is no hip hop in that story. So
no, that's the modern.
Yes,
these are both modern day takes.
Oh, okay. So the most modern takes.
Yeah, the Most Dangerous Game one I think is in New York.
Okay, I'm gonna go with that one because they're both. Someone might as well make a Most Dangerous Game competition, like if you or a modern show. Because if you do that with the Fall of the House of Usher, the Fall of the House of Usher is a metaphor for incest. So either the people making that show don't get it, or that show doesn't exist. I'm going with The Most Dangerous Game.
You're correct. You're now 2 for 5. I just saw the title. I was searching through short stories and I saw Fall of the House of Usher. I'm like, that sounds like something Quibi would make. Is a show called House of Usher, starring Usher.
Like if that was a reality game show that was about women trying to sleep with Usher or something, then House of Usher would be a great name. But yeah, I couldn't see them going to that. I'd like the idea of a Most Dangerous Game adaptation that stars Liam Hemsworth and Christoph Waltz actually sounds pretty good. It's good casting, at least.
Yeah, it's not the best Hemsworth, but
But if you're not going to get Chris, because they weren't going to get Chris.
Yeah,
Liam's pretty good.
Yeah. All right, and again, that is one of their movies in chapters, Sean. So you can. Yeah.
I'll just have to wait till all the chapters are out so I can just watch it. You know, and what we just call movies.
Yeah. All right. We're halfway through the game. You're 2 for 5.
Great. That's almost halfway.
Which of these is an actual reboot of a TV prank show from the 2000s? Is Quibi rebooting Crank Yankers, the Comedy Central series, with a new cast of puppets and Post Malone as the human host?
Okay, I've never heard of Crank Yankers.
It was a Comedy Central show. It was the same time as like Colbert Report, yeah. Or are they rebooting Punk'd, the MTV series that had Ashton Kutcher, but is now hosted by Chance the Rapper?
Punk'd.
That's real, yeah.
Yeah.
They rebooted Punk'd with Chance the Rapper. I do like the idea of Post Malone basically looks like a human puppet, so that would be fine. Yeah. But yeah. All right, I couldn't find that many. I toyed with doing a Jackass thing, but you can't do Jackass with someone who's not Johnny Knoxville in the game.
Yeah,
so
I would have probably, if I were making the fake answer, I think I would have gone for like a Nickelodeon slime type show. Is where my instincts would have gone.
Yeah. All right. So you are 3 for 6.
Yeah, 50%.
50%.
It's still enough, but because our grading system's fucked up. But here we go.
This is going to be a hard one to get through. These are both so stupid. Which of these is an actual cooking competition show?
Okay, I love cooking competition shows.
Is it Dishmantled, It's like dismantled, but with an H.
I get the pun, yeah.
Hosted by Titus Burgess, a show in which two chefs are blindfolded and blasted in the face with mystery food shot through a cannon. They have to identify the exploded dish and then race against the clock to recreate it. Whichever chef comes closest to the original dish wins a cash prize.
Okay, that's a pretty good pitch for a TV show, I have to say.
Or is it Saving the Best for Last? Hosted by Paula Deen, a show in which two chefs compete to prepare the best last meal for a death row inmate. Who also serves as the judge. Whichever chef wins gets $10,000 to donate to a charity of their choice.
It has to be dismantled. There is so much ethically wrong with that other pitch that if it's the other pitch, I'm going to be truly abhorred with everything. Because also, I like with Dismantled, I hope that the segment at the beginning of the show where they're just shot in the face with food through a cannon, that's like the disheveled segment. Like, there's lots of great puns you can do with. We love the prefix dis. So I think there's a lot of potential. So it's the dish, whatever that one was, the dish one.
I'm sorry, no, I'm kidding. It's You're correct. Saving the Best for Last came up in my horrible brain, but it doesn't sound that far off from what Quibi would do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great if you're making some like post-apocalyptic show, or it's like, you know, it's the season 1 of New Who where they had like all the weird fucked up versions of classic game shows, like like that, like Big Brother and stuff. That would be a great one if they wanted to go back to Satellite 5 in the next season of Doctor Who. Should send that pitch in.
All right, so you're now 4 for 7.
Okay, yeah. You just couldn't like restrain your fucked up dark humor on that last answer, so it kind of gave it away.
I know, but it was like I had the idea and then I'm like, I'm not going to come up with something better than that. All right. Which of these is an actual Quibi series? Murder House Flip. Unscripted reality show from the producers of CSI about renovating houses where famous murders took place, removing the stains of the past and taking the homes from morbid to marvelous. Or is it Flipped, a scripted series about a couple played by Will Forte and Caitlin Olsen who try to get into the house flipping game, only for the Mexican drug cartel, led by Andy Garcia, to exploit their talents to renovate cartel mansions?
I'm going to go with the second one, the scripted show, because I just feel like the people who own the haunted houses and like whatever, like they would be losing out on this whole like business opportunity for the future of it, like having haunted house tours and that kind of stuff if you have the whole house renovated.
Well, Sean, I cheated on this one because those are both real. Those are both Quibi series. And when I saw they had 2 fucking house flipping shows, one about cleaning up murder mansions, that literally, I took that from their description, the morbid to marvelous thing.
It's funny because that was the thing that I thought gave it away as something that you wrote.
I know. Oh my god. I'm going to give you the point for that one still.
Yeah.
Which means you're 5 for 8. But what the fuck?
That's people who own murder mansions have a bit more self-respect, okay? Come on. Jesus Christ.
All right, round 9. There is a Quibi show called Fierce Queens.
Wait, is Fierce Queens or Fears Queens?
Fierce, F-I-E-R-C-E.
Okay, so fierce like a tiger is fierce.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fierce Queens. What is the actual premise and pitch for the series called Fierce Queens? Okay. Is Fierce Queens a show presented and hosted by Claire Foy, star of The Crown, that is a history series from the BBC exploring the lives of Britain's fabulous female leaders, from Queen Elizabeth to Margaret Thatcher? Or is Fierce Queens, presented and hosted by Reese Witherspoon, a nature series from the BBC about the fabulous females of the animal kingdom, from ant queens to speedy cheetahs?
I'm going to say I'm already very disappointed that this isn't a drag queen show, because that was going to be my guess based on...
They have one of those as well.
Okay.
I think it's called like Drag It Up or something.
It's got to be the nature documentary. I feel like that has just way more... You can get a lot more episodes out of that if it's successful versus, you know, England is a sexist society that has a sexist history, and so it only has a limited number of female leaders, and anyone who did they call Margaret Thatcher fabulous? Was that the adjective they used? Yeah, that's wrong.
Yeah.
So let's go with the nature one.
You're correct.
Okay, thank God.
You're 6 for 9. You had a rough start, but you're doing better.
Yeah.
I thought the ones I put at the top were easy, but apparently not.
I think the ones at the top are like way further away from my own taste in media. So once we got to like, I've seen Animal Planet, and that sounds like a thing that would be on Animal Planet. Yeah. So don't watch any reality.
I also love that just Quibi's sense of feminism is like just female animals. Hey guys, animals don't have a sense of gender. Fuck off with that.
No, it's
anyway.
Fucking whatever.
Final round.
All
right. Which of these LBGTQ themed reality competition series is an actual show on Quibi? Is it Game Show, spelled G-A-Y-M-E?
Yeah, okay.
A competition show celebrating the LGBTQ community and its allies, where in each episode, 2 straight contestants are paired with a celebrity life partner as they battle head-to-head in physical, mental, and emotional challenges for the title Queen of the Straights.
Wait, so it's a straight, let's say it's because it could be a man or a woman.
Yeah.
But say it's a straight man is then paired with a male celebrity. Is the male celebrity gay?
They didn't say male. It's just a celebrity. The celebrity is gay, yes.
Oh, so the gender of the celebrity doesn't matter. It's their sexual orientation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay. Or is it Playing It Straight? A dating show set on a ranch with 1 woman and 12 men, half of whom are gay, but all are pretending to be straight. Through dates and group activities, the woman votes to eliminate the men she believes to be gay, with a big cash prize at the end, going to the woman if the last guy is straight, but to the guy if he successfully passed through the whole competition.
Playing It Straight sounds like it's bad, but that's the trashy kind of bad that is like, that show sounds fucking amazing in a terrible way. I'm going with Playing It Straight.
Playing It Straight is not on Quibi.
But is it a real thing?
It was on ABC in 2004.
Okay.
You still lost this round because I asked which one was on Quibi.
Yeah.
Game Show is a real Quibi show. You finished 6 for 10.
I got some YouTube I need to check out with this Playing It Straight.
Playing It Straight is an actual ABC show from 2004
that
where
makes
they
more
made
sense.
Gay guys try to pass and they could win a cash prize if they tricked the straight woman.
Yeah, that like the time period definitely crystallizes that a little bit. Like I feel like I can see that show in my mind's eye right now.
Yeah. Well, you did pretty good. 6 for 10. That's a low D.
Yeah. I mean, that last one you cheated because you did pick like an actual TV show instead of making up one on your own. So
the question
I'm going to email the dean and say that I feel like it's not fair. I paid a lot of money to be at the University of the Weekly Stuff podcast, and I just don't feel like I'm being respected in this class when the teacher's trying to sort of give me a test that inveigles many of the questions behind false pretenses. So expect an email in your inbox is what I'm saying, Professor Lack.
Which of my fake shows would you most want to watch?
What was the American in Paris?
American Paris. Okay.
Not that I want to
watch.
None of them I would want to watch anything of. I just want that show to be. Again, it's not even that I want the show to be real. I just want that meeting to have been real.
Yes.
And there's like one dude who's like the youngest executive, who's like works in marketing or something, who's there, but because they're like so far down on the totem pole, they can't say anything, but they know this, like, everybody knows that this is a sex thing, but the old fuckers in this room that don't get the cultural context around this, I just want that meeting to occur. I don't need the show to exist.
Thank you. I think saving the best for last is the show that in morbid fantasy I don't want to exist, but I feel that's going to happen at some point.
I would love that as a like weird, again, some like weird like dystopic fiction. Someone's like flipping through channels on the TV and like that goes through really quick.
Yeah, I mean we're headed there, sadly. Yeah. All right, have I convinced you to sign up for Quibi?
I mean, it's I guess I know where the $2 billion went, because it seems like most of these are shows that are hosted by pre-existing celebrities, which was their strategy to get people to watch them. Again, a strategy that's not successful. If they wanted to get people to watch it, they should have hired fucking PewDiePie, or Ninja. There's the people who made this are colossally stupid, and they shouldn't get money for anything. Yeah. They should go home and be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, the PewDiePie, the Nazi streaming network.
It would have been successful if you exclusively signed PewDiePie to something like this, which you'd have to give him more than $2 billion to do. But if you did that and you exclusively signed like PewDiePie and a couple of other huge major influencers on some of those platforms like YouTube and Twitch and Instagram and stuff, you could make this platform and make it be successful. That's the only way to do it.
Prank show where PewDiePie goes around putting swastikas on people's back and seeing if they notice it.
Sure, yes.
That sounds like the kind of thing he'd do.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, the world is stupid and vapid and dumb.
But there there are things in this world that still make sense because this thing burned in a fiery wreckage. And,
Yes.
and somewhere out there is footage of Idris Elba driving a fucking race car around and doing bullshit with it. So that sounds good. Wait, was the one where people got canned food fired at their face in a can? That was real?
That's real.
Okay, I didn't Google
Dismantled.
that.
Yeah.
Like some
That
of
sounds
these,
kind of good.
Yeah, some of these I want to see some clips on YouTube, which again maybe indicates something about the flaw in their whole media strategy.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for listening. That's the Weekly Stuff podcast. Next week we will be doing an episode all about Mobile Suit Gundam Wing with our sister show, Weekly Suit Gundam. So more Gundam coming at you. Better than anything you'll find on Quibi. We'll see you next week.
I'll kill you.